Let's set the scene. The year is 1991, and you are waking up one Saturday morning as the most excited kid in the whole world. You barely slept the night before, but who can blame you? Today is your birthday. You want only one thing. Ever since that day, 3 months ago, you have only wanted this one thing. The newest gaming console all your friends at school are talking about, the SNES. It's more colourful than real life, they say. It makes sounds that are like actual instruments. It's the most powerful thing ever made. You rush downstairs to see your family waiting for you in the kitchen, and in front of them, a wrapped box. Before even saying good morning back, you rush to the counter, furiously ripping and tearing the wrapping paper until you see it. Those magical words, Super Nintendo. But that's not all, kid, your father says. The man at the store said we should get you a game for that thing. Apparently this one came out a few days ago. He puts a cartridge on the counter, and on it, a name you don't recognize. Final Fantasy II, the original name for the game that will soon be known as Final Fantasy IV. With your family's help, you set up the console. You are more than ready to play your first game of the newest console generation. And with that, let's come back. Welcome to my video on Final Fantasy IV, the beginning of the most exciting era in Final Fantasy, the Visionary era. The opening of Final Fantasy IV is an incredible advancement for the series. From our journey through the foundational era, I think it's safe to say we all expected the same thing. To begin by naming our cast of characters, then have a slideshow telling us the backstory of the world. But we were mistaken. Zooming out a little to look at the wider Final Fantasy series, whether you are aware of it or not, nearly every opening is one of the most memorable moments of that respective game. More than any other moment, our Final Fantasy opening is timeless. The Red Wings opening is what I would consider to be the progenitor of this trend. Compared to what came before, and even what will come after, it is incredible. We fade in on a squadron of airships, flying in formation together. For 15 seconds, we watch as the world map we will be exploring soon pass us by, all the while listening to the legendary Red Wings theme. I've said it before, I'll say it again, and I'll keep saying it for every video I ever do. Video game music is one of, if not the most powerful tool a developer has at their disposal when trying to convey emotion to the players. The Red Wings is one of the best examples of this. The uniform beating drums, the booming horns, the crash of the cymbals, and especially that aside where the horns play a melody that would sound fitting in a main villain's march. All of it instills a feeling of fear. Paired with the visuals, you can put together you are watching a powerful military force. On that note, we are taken onto one of the ships. Introducing Cecil Harvey, Final Fantasy's first and one of its best protagonists. We are going to be spending a fair bit of time, especially in this first half of the game, talking about Cecil, as he is absolutely pivotal in understanding the themes and message of the entire game. For now though, you would be forgiven for thinking he wasn't a protagonist. We see the mission he is currently returning from. The Kingdom of Baron has commanded his squad to steal Mysidia's crystal. In the process of doing so, Cecil commanded his men to slaughter the innocent civilians protecting it, a truly evil act that he weakly justifies, just as much to his men as to himself, as imperative for their kingdom's survival. But Cecil understands just how wrong what he has done is. In multiple instances, including after justifying what he led, he has a unique sprite for looking down at the ground, remorseful and ashamed of himself. But the world of Final Fantasy IV doesn't allow for idle grief. Monsters attack the airship and Cecil is thrust into battle. Cecil, that is, not us. That's right, Final Fantasy IV uses a new storytelling tool we haven't seen yet. Totally scripted battles that can contain dialogue or party members that are never controllable by the player. These are used for different purposes throughout the game, and we will go over them as they appear, but the universal effect of this in every instance is much more immersive and engaging storytelling. It's also a piece of evidence for a claim I may as well make right now so we can keep it in mind going forward. Final Fantasy IV has some of the best integration of its story elements with its gameplay systems that I have ever seen, not limited to Final Fantasy. It's a big claim, but one I will hopefully make clear as we progress through the game. Disposing of the enemy, we approach Baron, Cecil's home, as well as the dominant military force of the world. At the castle, we meet the king's advisor Baigan, who chastises Cecil's pity towards the people of Mysidia. The ruthlessness of Baron is the main message in this part of the opening, as we see Baigan speak to the king privately, poisoning him with suspicion and paranoia, which he easily gives himself into. He will soon strip Cecil of command of the Red Wings, just for asking him a simple why. Baigan and the king both represent an extremely important force in Cecil's story. Baron, From this interaction alone, the player can put together that Baron is the figurative devil on Cecil's shoulder, encouraging him to give in to his darkness. Of course, this doesn't absolve Cecil of responsibility. He understands this just as much as we do, but it does invite a question. Why? Why is Cecil following these orders from Baron when he clearly still has a conscience? To help us understand that, we meet Kain. Final Fantasy IV has 3 characters that we must fully understand in order to pass the game's overarching theme. Cecil, our protagonist, Golbez, our protagonist's shadow, and Kain, our protagonist if he took a different path. We will meet Golbez soon. The next part of the opening will act as Kain's introduction. His first line is spent defending Cecil, asking the king to reconsider his decree, but the king is in no state for reason. He immediately lumps Kain in with Cecil and orders him to go on the suicide mission to Mist as well. While this marks the end of the opening cutscene, the next little part of the story really feels fitting to include as part of the game's opening. So, let's keep going before we recap what we've learned and need to remember going forward. In private now, Cecil apologizes to Kain. The obvious thing he's apologizing for is putting Kain in a situation where he lost favor with the king. But what's interesting is right after apologizing, Cecil makes mention of his raid on Mysidia. It is here we get some critically important information needed to understand these characters. Cecil, in the context of exclaiming his guilt about Mysidia, reveals to the player that he is a Dark Knight, a role he was ordered to take from the King of Baron. I absolutely love this detail. Cecil is somebody full of light, who was ordered to hide it under a soul-crushing darkness, trusting command of his power would be used for the greater good. To represent this, when we see his face later in the game, he has stunning long white hair in his menu sprite. However, when he is a Dark Knight, that face is completely covered by the menacing and imposing Dark Knight helmet. Now that Cecil has lost trust in the king to use his powers for good, he sees the value in the path that Kain chose. Kain never knew his real father well, but he did know that he was a dragoon of high regard. Likely out of a desire to feel the connection with his father, Kain took up his legacy, sacrificing the potential for military advancement available to Dark Knights to feel close with his late father. In this path, Cecil now sees something he once couldn't. Kain trusted his heart, becoming a man he could be proud of. Cecil trusted his orders, becoming a man he could never be proud of. The way back to our room is scored by a phenomenal track, Baron's theme, an OST that perfectly instills in the player how Cecil is feeling, trapped by stifling royalty that is forcing him down a road he doesn't truly wish to take. Before we meet another major character, we hear of her in the Chamber of White Mages. Apparently, a woman named Rosa became a White Mage to help and support us. On our way to the courtyard, we meet Rosa. While not much is exchanged here other than a promise to talk later, we see Cecil's persistent guilt. Cecil is cagey in this interaction. He doesn't want to open up to Rosa and would rather bear the burden of his guilt himself. Nearing our room, we meet this game's Sid, an airship engineer for Baron, who is the mastermind behind their recent rapid militarization, something he is not proud to admit. That night, in his room alone, Cecil reflects. We learn that the king has not always been this way. He once raised Cecil and Kain together like they were his own children. This is an essential piece of the puzzle. Cecil and Kain are, practically, brothers, and the king is Cecil's adoptive father. Now it makes sense. The question of why Cecil followed those orders from the king. Because Cecil didn't see them as orders from the king of the recently militarized nation. He saw them as orders from his father. It's difficult not to feel a little sympathy for Cecil here. Of course, in the real world, we aren't becoming Dark Knights for the sake of our kingly fathers, but I do think we all have, at one point in our lives, taken on some darkness in order to keep those we hold dear lighter. To become someone who, we know, doesn't actually represent us to make someone else happy. Mid-thought, Rosa enters the room. The ensuing conversation establishes another extremely important theme for the game, the role job identity has in shaping character identity. In the world of Final Fantasy IV, who you are is a big determinant of how strong you are in your job, and the inverse applies. The job you are on will shape the user to become better at it. For Cecil, he knows that the more he uses his Dark Knight abilities, the less and less empathy he will feel for others. He will be able to commit another atrocity like Mysidia without remorse. This is where Rosa's role is revealed to us. She loves Cecil, believing in who he is behind the mask. It is this trust and love that breaks Cecil out of his depressive stupor. Rosa gives Cecil a reason to fight that isn't just to uphold the orders of a man he knows, deep down, is never going to return. But no amount of love can deny the reality. Cecil is a Dark Knight, and as a Dark Knight, true love will never be possible. It's on that note we get a text scroll scored by the best rendition of the main theme of Final Fantasy we have heard yet. In my Final Fantasy 3 video, I said that the use of this theme is so important in every Final Fantasy game to punctuate the beginning and the end of the journey, a figurative notion that is core to every Final Fantasy. To expand on that thought now, we can use this theme to help us answer a very weighty question I will not be able to answer until probably the end of this series. What does it mean to be a Final Fantasy game? It's an extremely loaded question, and one I'm not even going to try to answer yet, as we are nowhere near ready to. However, we should definitely note going forward when the main theme of Final Fantasy is used, as these moments and what they represent are an essential clue in understanding the fundamental DNA that makes up a Final Fantasy game. The text scroll itself doesn't explain anything we haven't already put together through the course of the opening, and acts as a recap to make sure everyone is on the same page as they embark on their first Final Fantasy adventure of the new generation. And with that, the opening of Final Fantasy IV draws to a close. This is, by a country mile, the best opening in the series so far. I don't think it's even fair to compare it to what came before. The way the game shows, not tells, the player the state of the world, the characters and their relationships, the internal conflicts and themes the main character will tackle on their journey, it is truly remarkable. I think something can be said of how much value can be gotten from playing these early Final Fantasy games back to back to back to back. It makes openings like this, which are still in the context of the modern day great, shine all the brighter for knowing just how much the Final Fantasy devs have grown. But the fun doesn't end there. The first half of Final Fantasy IV is going to develop, pay off, and engage the player in every theme the opening has set up. I hope you're strapped in, because we are in for a wild ride. Welcome to the world map of Final Fantasy IV. I covered in my Final Fantasy III video the importance of a world map theme. It acts as the theme for each individual game, a representation of the tone and spirit the game will embody. When I listen to Final Fantasy IV's main theme, I hear primarily despair and repression. The woodwind melody overpowers everything else with its sad and melancholy theme. Things like the piano in the background, which begin an ascension to a lighter, happier key, are stopped short when overpowered by the woodwind. It is the perfect theme for Cecil, a man who wishes to grow past what Baron made him into, but is stopped by the guilt and trauma of his past actions. Making our way towards Mist, we enter our first random encounter. Ladies and gents, it's time. It is my absolute joy and pleasure to introduce and talk to you about one of the most iconic and incredible systems of turn-based combat in JRPG history, the Active Time Battle System, or to the cool kids, the ATB system. On a high level, it's really easy to explain. The ATB system is a middle ground between live action combat and turn-based combat. Every character has this bar next to their MP. Depending on what type of encounter you get, a preemptive strike, ambushed, or a back attack, the gauge starts combat filled a certain amount. Then, in real time, this bar will fill at a speed depending on two factors. First, the unit's agility stat. Second, an independent setting you can change to determine how fast or slow you want combat to feel. When the gauge fills to max, you can execute an action, so Kane is able to attack or jump with a full ATB. Depending on if you are on active or wait mode, the process of choosing a target for your action, or in the case of magic, a specific spell, can either pause all the ATB gauges for allies and enemies, or continue to advance the gauges. The ATB is then spent, and resets to 0 until the action is fully executed. So for Kane, it will start filling again once he lands from his jump, aka the gauge is paused during animations. It then fills again, etc, etc. This will, most likely, be the same base ATB system we will see and experience in the next, including FF4, 6 games. The variance in the system game to game will be in the small details. For example, the base gauge fill speed can differ a fair bit, separate from the adjustable setting mentioned earlier. Final Fantasy IV, for example, has quite a fast base ATB fill speed compared to Final Fantasy VI. Honestly, that's pretty much it when it comes to the ATB system. Later on, I want to talk more about its effect on late game combat and how it evolves throughout the game, but for now, let's leave it there. To conclude, Final Fantasy IV marks the exciting beginning of the legacy of the ATB system, an innovation that integrates the turn-based combat of the foundational era with the real-time action combat of the future. While we explore the Mist Cave, I want to point out an incredible small detail with Cecil. So, as we know from Final Fantasy III, the Dark Knight's signature move is an AoE attack that hits all enemies. This is also the case in Final Fantasy IV with the move Darkness, but Darkness comes at a cost. In order to use the move, Cecil must spend HP. Remember earlier when I said Final Fantasy IV has some of the best integration of story and gameplay I've ever seen? Well, here's another piece of evidence to add to the pile. Not only does the story tell us that becoming a great Dark Knight will cost Cecil his empathy, his humanity, when we use the moves of the Dark Knight in gameplay, they literally take away Cecil's humanity. They hurt him to use. Cecil was not born for this. Being someone he isn't is hurting him emotionally with how he treats himself and his relationships as well as physically. But wait, there's more. Let's compare Cecil to Kain. At the moment, Kain is able to do way more damage than Cecil with his jump ability versus Cecil's darkness. Kain, who became a Dragoon by following his heart, is better at his job than Cecil. 1991 by the way, this game that came out 35 years ago is doing what so many games today fail to: make us play the circumstances and themes the story sets up. Nearing the end of Mist Cave, we get our first proper boss of the game, the Mist Dragon. First, holy peak, this battle theme is crazy. Those strings got me moving like Okay, anyways, the actual fight. If you were the layperson looking at this game separated from the knowledge of the legacy it will leave, I think its greatest aspect is its boss design. The bosses are consistently amazing. Like seriously, they are so fun here. Because of that, I'll be going over a fair few of the bosses we encounter along the way, and hopefully by describing them, you can gain a clearer image of what makes their design so special. On a high level though, the bosses of Final Fantasy IV excel because their design is deeply embedded in the ATB system. Most bosses have a unique interplay with either the ATB system or the specific jobs and actions you will have available to you at any given time. As for the Mist Dragon, its mechanic is simple. Sporadically, it will switch forms, going from the dragon into mist. In its mist form, if you hit the boss, it will immediately counterattack with cold mist, a lightly punishing AoE. When I was playing this by the way, I was popping off. In my Final Fantasy I video, I said exactly that I didn't like the Beyblade system because it didn't let you dynamically react to changing circumstances in combat. But here we are, 3 games later, and the new combat system lets me do exactly that. I'm able to hold off using jump on Kain until I see the dragon return, making combat feel so much more engaging and interactive. With the Mist Dragon falling, we arrive at the town of Mist. Taking out the bomb ring, the king's secret plan is made clear. The ring contained 5 bombs, which are released to burn the town to the ground. He wanted to eliminate the nearby town of summoners so the powerful magic wouldn't interfere with Baron's empire, but the atrocities don't end there for Cecil. In the burning wreckage, he hears a child call out for her mother. When Cecil and Kain go to her, the child reveals her mother has died because the dragon she summoned was killed. The player can put together what this means instantly. Cecil killed this child's mother. Kain tells him the hard truth. If they wish to remain on Baron's side, they must kill this child. But Cecil has had enough. He's done following the orders of a devil parading the facade of his father. He resolves to fight Baron and end its reign of terror. Kain is with him. It would sully the legacy of his father to continue fighting for such evil. When the pair try to take the child to safety, she flies into a rage, summoning Titan, who causes a massive landslide that blocks the way back to Mist, as well as separates Cecil from Kain. Cecil awakens next to the girl, who is still unconscious, and rushes her to the nearest settlement, the desert oasis town of Kaipo. After settling her down in the inn for the night, we are surprised by a squad of soldiers sent from Baron. They have heard there is a surviving summoner and are here to eliminate her. In our first official act of defiance against the role pushed upon Cecil, he fights the soldiers. We see him here not as a Dark Knight made to attack, maim and plunder, but something else. Someone who wants to protect, to save, to atone. In his conversation with the girl afterwards, he promises to protect her, gaining her tentative trust. We learn her name, Rydia, as she joins our party. Rydia is a tragic character. Her story and progression in Final Fantasy IV really embody the theme of lost innocence. A child forced to grow up by the cruelness of the situation fate has thrust upon her. And, like so much of Final Fantasy IV, this is excellent excellently integrated into the gameplay. When Rydia joins your party, she is level 1 versus Cecil's starting level of 10. And of course she's level 1, she's a child who has never seen combat before, but that's an issue. She needs to see some combat, and soon. We have a dungeon coming up that we need her help in. So, like how she is forced to grow up in the story, some incredible examples of this coming up soon, we must force her to grow up in gameplay, getting some quick levels. Rydia by herself is an interesting enough character, but then you look at her from the perspective of her relationship to Cecil and it gets even richer. Rydia is the physical manifestation of Cecil's guilt, what he must atone for. She is a constant reminder for him that no matter what he does, he can't change the past. But in Rydia, there's hope. If she can forgive Cecil, he will attain some alleviation of the guilt we have seen plague him throughout the opening. That moment, by the way, is one of the best moments in a game that has more iconic moments than every other Final Fantasy so far put together. Super excited to talk about that soon, but for now, back to the present. In Kaipo, something of note can be found near the Oasis. An NPC offers us a dance. If you've seen either of my previous 2 videos, you know where I'm going. My favourite Final Fantasy motif to yap about, the dances. To give a very brief TLDR, a Final Fantasy dance is representative of the technological advancements from game to game and, by extension, their ability to tell a story. With the SNES, you'd expect a big advancement here, and there definitely is an advancement, but it's not super major. Dances, like this one, are more expressive than ever, having multiple unique sprites that interact more broadly with the environment. They also all have a unique dance OST that differs from dance to fit with the vibe. When considering the lack of substantial advancement, we need to keep in mind the reality of what we're seeing. I'm not playing the SNES version and didn't play the NES versions of Final Fantasy 1 through 3, so I'm definitely not getting the full picture of the dance evolution. That idea, by the way, that I missed something by not going from NES to SNES is something I want to keep in mind when I talk about the second half of this game, because I suspect it's a big reason I didn't love it, but more on that later. In Kaipo, we find an unconscious Rosa. She succumbed to desert fever, needing a sand pearl to cure. To obtain one, we will need to pass through the underground waterway, then the Kingdom of Damsium to reach the antlion den containing it. With our path set, and after training Rydia up a little, we proceed through the waterway. On our way through, we meet a sage named Tala. He is also on his way to Damsium, thinking his daughter Anna has been deceived by a bard into marrying him. Wishing to rescue her, he joins us on our journey. Tala is portrayed as an aloof old man, but a genius mage. He is motivated throughout the game by his intense care for his daughter. An amazing detail about Tala can be seen if we take a look at his MP count, 90. Throughout the whole time we have Tala, he will never have a higher MP cap, no matter how much we level him. This makes sense because of how he is presented in the story as the strongest of yesterday, someone who's been there, done that. He's already reached the pinnacle of magic. There's no more growth left in him. I'm telling you, this game's integration of story and gameplay is legendary. I also really love the gameplay effect of this. Soon, Tala will have access to the highest level black and white magic. However, those high level spells cost a lot of MP, 30 for an Arga type spell. So while you can tear through enemies by using this OP character, you need to judge the trade-off of doing that versus using him more evenly. We'll need to see a few more examples of job design before I can speak on it definitively, but just know, Tala isn't the exception to the rule. Job design rules in Final Fantasy IV. But all isn't well in Final Fantasy IV Town. Tala also invites discussion on my returning top op from Final Fantasy III, the UI. Now, let me make this very clear. The UI in Final Fantasy IV is nowhere near as debilitating as I found it in Final Fantasy III, and the reason is simple. In Final Fantasy III, you needed to make a lot of choices on what job you wanted to run at what time, and having a poor UI that didn't properly explain what each job did really made me feel limited in how I could experiment with that game's combat system. Final Fantasy IV doesn't give you that choice though. You have to play with the jobs the story is giving you at any given time. This forces the player to enact what I suspect was the intended way to figure out jobs in Final Fantasy III, trial and error. This works well enough, I'd say, at relieving frustration. I'm really happy to say I didn't feel the need to Google anything while I was playing. The first Final Fantasy game not to commit that cardinal sin. However, it's not perfect. For example, Tala has this move, Recall. After using it a couple times, I gathered it's a randomizer that allows him to either cast a random spell or do nothing. Having finished the game, I understand the move pool that Recall can call upon, those being the spells he will eventually remember on Mount Ordeals. But at the time, I didn't know what spells Recall could pull from, or what their effects could could be. This meant I never really used Recall throughout my playthrough, not because I preferred his straight up magic, but because I didn't fully understand it. Again, I want to reiterate, this is a very minor criticism. If you want examples of debilitating UIs, take a look at Final Fantasy 2 and 3, but for Final Fantasy 4, it's only a minor annoyance. Knowing a little bit of Final Fantasy 5, I'm really curious and worried if these concerns will be addressed by that game, since out of every game we've covered yet, it needs a good UI by far the most. But anyways, not to get sidetracked, at the end of the waterway we fight the boss, the Octomammoth. Mechanically, it's nothing too unique, but I kind of like how, as you damage him, he has less and less tentacles above the water. It's a really cool kind of health bar effect that made the fight fun for me. After sliming him, we leave the waterway just to see the red wings bomb Dancian. Rushing over, we find the castle destroyed, dead soldiers litter the hallways, and treasure rooms lay plundered. Approaching the top, we see a woman lying on the ground who Teller recognizes as Anna. A blonde-haired man comes out of hiding. Teller calls him out as the man who deceived Anna, attacking him in what I think is meant to be a comedic moment. Also, side note, I would be remiss not to mention the famous line of Teller's, "You spoony bard." Like, bro, what the fuck does that even mean? Spoony? Like a spoon? I remember when I was like 10 years old, I had this friend in high school and we used to call each other spoons and we found out like the funniest shit. But I thought that was just an us thing. Is it actually like a thing? I really like that the Pixel Remaster includes these famous memes from the old versions of the games. Be it Guy Speak Beaver in FF2 or coming up, I know there's something from FF6 they kept. It makes these versions feel like love letters to the originals, having the incredible effect of relieving my worry I'm not playing an authentic enough version of these games to have a valid take. Anyway, after not so brutally beating the bard with his baton in another example of a scripted battle being used to convey story more authentically, Anna calls out for her father. In her dying words, she tells the party of the main threat behind the attack, the new commander of the Red Wings, Golbez. I adore this introduction to Golbez. It's perfect for his character and role in Cecil's story as his shadow. It must also be a powerful moment for Cecil. He wasn't able to fully embrace the darkness needed to succeed as commander of the Red Wings and thrive as a Dark Knight, so Baron just found someone else, someone more willing to throw away their humanity. Anna passes away soon after this, sending Teller on his mission to take revenge against Golbez, leaving our party to do so. The next bit of the cutscene is bizarre. At a high level, we convince Edward to fight past his grief by helping us to retrieve the Sand Ruby, but it's just done so weirdly. Edward is, rightfully I think, portrayed as being paralysed by grief over the deaths of his parents and girlfriend, who all died to protect him. But while the game takes seriously the struggles of Cecil and Kane, Edward is treated as a clown off the bat, with Cecil hitting him and Rosa scolding him. Now, there is a reason for that. In the upcoming story and in gameplay, such as with his unique action Hide, we'll see his cowardice on display. But for now, these two don't know that. While this is an isolated incident, there won't be any more examples of a party treating new characters in what I'd call an unfair way. It is indicative of the level of tonal dissonance that, especially the second part of the game, will have in some of its story moments, especially around death. Tracking onwards, a new crew of Cecil, Rydia and Edward reach the Antlion's Den. Working through it, we see the much welcomed return of one of my favourite additions to Final Fantasy III, hidden pathways in dungeons. I did mention it before, but also from FF3, hidden items in town make a return too. Unfortunately, I do think they are done worse here, and the why of it really boils down to one thing: loot. It sucks. Plain and simple. What made Final Fantasy III's hidden pathways and heck, dungeon loot in general so fun to explore was because of the consistently awesome gear you could get, or the chance of getting the only available MP restorative, an elixir. I won't go into Final Fantasy IV's item economy now, but I have a discussion on that plan for later. Don't worry, it won't be as long as Final Fantasy III's, but for now, all you need to know is it isn't as strong. In saying this though, while it definitely sucks to not be finding cooler loot in hidden pathways, you still get somewhat useful stuff like damage items or potions, and the added depth to dungeons still apply. They are more fun to explore because of these pathways on a base level, regardless of the reward for doing so. I just think some disappointment is warranted because we know by now Final Fantasy can do better. After fighting off the Antlion, we return to Kaipo and heal Rose's fever with the Sand Ruby. She reveals to the party that Golbez is manipulating the king to collect the crystals for himself, placing him now as the true head of Baron. She alerts us that the next target must be Fabul, which the group agrees that they must stop. A really interesting moment in this cutscene is when Edward mentions the path to Fabul is blocked by ice. Rosa says that Rydia should be able to cast it, as it is one of the most elementary black magics, but Rydia simply responds with No. The player has also probably noticed this from playing with Rydia and Teller, that while Teller had access to fire, blizzard and thunder, Rydia only got access to blizzard and thunder. This dialogue confirms that this was a very intentional choice, and an utterly brilliant one at that. It doesn't take a genius to put together the reason why she can't learn fire. Her home was burned to the ground. The thought of producing fire herself must be incredibly traumatic. However, if the group wants to literally proceed on the journey, and if Rydia wants to metaphorically proceed on her own journey of growth, it is something she must overcome. It's another way her character embodies the theme of lost innocence, of growing past the child she was that day mist burned into the woman the world needs her to be. Later that night, Edward is on the shore of the oasis, playing his harp and reminiscing about Anna when he's attacked by a Sahagin. In the scripted battle, we see Anna's ghost show up. She encourages Edward to fight for his people and home, to restore Damseam to glory. Now, being real for a second, if I'm going to glaze this game hard for how it treats 90% of its characters, I need to be honest when it treats character growth poorly. I think this moment, and Edward's arc, if you even want to call it that, fails. And hard. What they wanted with Edward, at least I think, was something akin to Gordon from Final Fantasy II. In that game, Gordon is the prince of a kingdom which his brother was in line to lead. However, when ambushed by that game's evil empire, his brother sacrifices himself for Gordon. Gordon runs away from his responsibility at the start of the game, refusing to take action while the main party of the game, kids by the way, do it for him. Eventually though, he joins the party on a mission through the ruins of his old kingdom's castle in order to attain Sunfire, an item necessary to defeating a critical blow to the Empire. Gordon is Edward, but done right. We had time with Gordon to establish his starting point and be convinced of his cowardice before the game took him on his arc. With Edward though, I'm not convinced he is as cowardly as the game is portraying him. Of course his parents sacrificed themselves for their son. Of course Anna sacrificed herself for not only her lover, but the prince of a fucking nation. And right after all this, he still went and fought with us to save Cecil's girlfriend. Gordon wasn't a coward because Scott sacrificed himself for him. He's a coward because he does nothing while kids go on suicide missions fighting empires. Anyways, wrapping this up, this payoff moment for his character is a failure because it's paying off something that never existed. The next morning, the party leave for Fabul and we get to try out Rosa in gameplay. Rosa is a white mage, a mainstay Final Fantasy job since way back in Final Fantasy 1, so we're pretty familiar with her kit by this point, but she isn't limited there. She has the unique actions aim and pray. So many characters have these by the way, unique actions that are separate from their job, adding depth to their characters and giving the player a little introduction to who they are. We've already covered Edward, who I think is the best example of this actually, but Rosa is no exception. We can gather that she is a sharpshooter with a bow from aim, something we may not expect from the pious, stereotypically defenseless white mage, as well as pray, demonstrating her purity of heart and goodness, something we have also seen from her caring treatment of Cecil. This all comes back to one of the big overarching themes of Final Fantasy IV I mentioned earlier. Job identity is tied deeply with character identity and vice versa. Teller was an old, aloof man. To use his job action, he needed to remember his most powerful spells because he just plain forgot them like the quirky guy he is. There's Edward and his alleged cowardice that are represented by his kit being very non-violent, singing, healing, and even having an option to hide. There's also Rydia, who's unable to cast a fire spell because of her character's trauma with fire in the story. And now Rosa, whose character truly embodies the spirit of a white mage, a support. You'll never have a Final Fantasy protagonist who is a white mage. Their role is to support the protagonist of whichever game they are in. And that is essentially who Rosa is. Cecil's emotional support in the story and physical support in combat. Do I wish there were more meat to her character besides being Cecil's +1? Yeah, probably, but coming from the foundational era, I'm not going to look a gift horse in the mouth. I'll just hope a little more for future games. Speaking of job identity, at the base of Mount Hobbs, we come across the block of ice Edward mentioned. Rydia casting fire here is a major moment for her character arc. It's the symbolic overcoming of her trauma from the burning of mist. For Rydia's character arc to be actualized, she needs to do two things. The first is overcoming the grief from losing her home. The second is to be able to forgive Cecil for what he has done. This moment marks the first of the 2 points being completed. If we use her in combat now, we can cast fire and use it against the enemies on the mountain. I'm gonna sound like a broken record in this video, but I really want to emphasize how special this game is when it comes to this stuff, this integration of gameplay and story. I love how Final Fantasy IV does this. It is such a special feat, seriously. At the top of the mountain, we meet a monk named Yang on his last legs after monsters ambushed and killed his squad. We help him fight off an attacking bomb in a really cool mini boss, where after slaying the mother bomb, it splits off into 6 separate bombs. bombs. A perfect excuse to showcase Yang's job action, Kick. Speaking with him, we warn him of the impending attack on Fabul, his home, which he agrees to join us to defend. Something of note in this conversation is when Cecil introduces Rydia to Yang, he explicitly states that the attack that destroyed her home was led by him. We haven't talked about Cecil's character arc in a little bit, but this moment confirms his actions still weigh heavy on his mind, but he isn't running away from what he did or blaming Baron. He takes responsibility for the attacks he led and took part in, something acknowledged and remembered by Rydia as marked by her ellipses. We are rapidly nearing the culmination of this character arc, this game's best moment, so let's push forward. With Yang now in tow, we have 5 party members. You may have noticed from the positioning of the names in combat or the menus that Final Fantasy IV increased the party count from 4 to 5. Final Fantasy isn't a stranger to changing the amount of party members from game to game. A trend started with Final Fantasy IV. It's a bit of a pointless debate to claim which is better, 3, 4 or 5 party members, as it's totally up to the individual game's combat system to justify the party member count. Speaking for Final Fantasy IV, I think the game really benefits from having 5 people in the party. The combat system certainly isn't limiting in FF4, but you do get used to it pretty quickly. Having more party members makes combat feel busier, more engaging and more, I guess epic is the word. We may not see that epicness early in the game, but later in the game, holy, it's going to get intense, and a big factor of that awesome intensity is having 5 party members. But it's not just party member limits that get a shake-up, formations did as well. In previous games, you could freely switch a party member between the front and back row. You want 4 frontliners? Sure. For backliners, okie dokie, but in Final Fantasy IV, you can't do this. You have 2 options, 3 frontliners and 2 backliners, or the inverse, 2 at the front and 3 at the back. In previous games, at least in my recollection, there wasn't an instance where there was a real trade-off between placing someone in the front or the back. It was always a no-brainer. Like, of course the tank is going up the front, and of course the mages are at the back. It was nice to have the option, but it could just as easily have not been there. Taking that option away from you in Final Fantasy IV changes the dynamic of putting people in the front or back row. It creates a satisfying square peg goes in the square hole and cylinder in the circle hole effect, if you catch my drift. There's never a moment in FF4 where you have 4 mages and 1 physical. It's a change fitting for how this game handles its changing rotation of party members, something I'm keen to talk about very soon. Venturing to the other side of the mountain, we reach Fabul Castle and speak to the king. He tasks us with the defense of the castle as the Baron invaders are already at Fabul's doorstep. In one of the best uses of scripted battles in the game, we fight hordes of soldiers. We watch as, slowly but surely, we are pushed further and further into the castle, losing more and more auxiliary soldiers to the onslaught until we are pushed into the room housing the crystal for the last stand. We expect to see soldiers bursting through that door, but the reality is much worse. It is Kain who enters. Cecil initially assumes he is here to help the defense. Maybe he escaped the landslide at Mist and has been in hiding since? But no, him initiating a fight with Cecil is all the confirmation we could need that he was captured by Baron following the landslide and is under the same mind control Rosa mentioned in Kaipo that Golbez put the king under. The game doesn't need to tell us he is mind controlled. The act of engaging Cecil in battle is more than enough confirmation. Remember their conversation in Mist and Kain's motivation? He wants to live up to the legacy of his father, of the great dragoon he once was, and he told Cecil that fighting for Baron would sully this most sacred memory for him. This makes the scripted battle that follows all the more tragic. We see a man mind controlled to do what we know would crush his soul the most. With Cecil on the ground, Rosa and Rydia rush into the room. When Cecil, practically his brother, called out to him, he didn't respond. But for Rosa, the mind control is temporarily broken. He is able to see himself again. That is until Golbez arrives. He commands Kain to steal the crystal, which he does, before taking Rosa hostage and leaving. Let's talk about this moment in the context of Cecil's story first. This is a crushing moment for the hero. Fighting true to himself has resulted in his brother betraying him, as well as endangering Rosa, who he cares about most. We weren't powerful enough to protect them, and of course he wasn't. The Dark Knight isn't a job made for protection, it's a job made for attack. This is a point poignantly made by the king when sending off the group. He says, darkness can never prevail over true evil. In the world of Final Fantasy IV, you cannot fight fire with fire. You must put it out with water. More and more, we see in the story that being a Dark Knight is holding Cecil back from his true potential and self. Then, there's this moment in the context of Kain's story. To understand that fully, we must look back to a one-off line in Mist. When Kain mentions that they must get Rosa out of Baron and Cecil thanks him, he says, save it, this isn't for your sake. I think there are 2 meanings behind this line that are coming to fruition now. The first is the embedded hostility in the line. Cain isn't happy with Cecil. This may be taking a bit too much of a liberty, as I think the major intention is related to the second meaning, but it's definitely possible that Cain here isn't happy that Cecil undertook the Mysidia mission. He saw his brother commit an atrocity, and while he will defend Cecil to the end, he will still judge him. Cut back to the present, and this is Cain's Mysidia. He's undertaken a surprise attack on another nation in order to kill its people and plunder its crystal. Now, I'm not putting the two actions on equal grounds. Cecil wasn't mind controlled like Cain is, but regardless of how we attribute guilt, we will come to discover Cain feels very guilty for the actions he does while under Golbez's control. This is the beginning of Cain's journey of atonement, the same journey Cecil is on. How he goes about atoning and gaining forgiveness will be the focus of his character going forward. Now, for the second meaning behind his line in Mist, Rosa. Cain reacting to Rosa and not Cecil is not another tone-deaf moment like with Edward. It is a very intentional and foreshadowed consequence of Cain's character. Cain loves Rosa, and yet he knows he can never have her. She loves Cecil, and Cecil loves her. As his brother, Cain could never go after Rosa because doing so is the ultimate betrayal of what Cecil cares about most. Poor Cain. In many respects, Cain could just as easily have been the protagonist of Final Fantasy IV, but he isn't. He won't get the forgiveness and atonement Cecil gets. He won't attain love like Cecil does. He will forever be stuck in the shadow of Cecil's light. And yet, it's Cain who is on the logo of Final Fantasy IV, not Cecil. Interpret that how you will. At this low point, Cecil wants answers. It's time to bring the fight to Baron. With the King's Blessing, we use a ship, port at Fabul, and take it across the ocean to Baron. However, while we travel, we are attacked by Leviathan, shipwrecking us all alone. The game doesn't say this, but I imagine Cecil must be pretty worried right now. Going back to Baron was his idea, and if Rydia, Edward, or Yang died in the attack, it would be more lives weighing on his shoulders. Entering the world map, we see that we are on a cape. In the distance, a town. In one of the most genius and ahead of its time moments I have ever seen in any game, we are forced to enter the town, what is revealed to be Mysidia. There is literally no way for Cecil to continue on this continent without entering. There is no task space to avoid going in. Words do not do justice how genius of an integration of story and gameplay this is. We have discussed in Fabul that Cecil could not save those he cared about because of his role as the Dark Knight. He figuratively can no longer proceed on his journey while being in this role. And so, the world of Final Fantasy IV responded by forcing him to face his demon, the place that sent him on this journey of atonement. Cecil not avoiding the town and going straight into it is literally what he has been doing in the story so far. Like in Mount Hobbs when he readily admitted to Yang what he did and missed. Cecil doesn't run away from responsibility. He owns up to it and faces it. That is what heroes do. But every hero needs their sword, and that's what we will try to attain in this Mysidia arc. Exploring the town, which by the way has an unjustifiably banging OST, like holy shit, this thing has been moving like ooh. We can speak to some of the NPCs. They are justifiably terrified and enraged at our presence. If you speak to the NPC at the weapon shop, he will mock if we are here to buy more weapons to butcher their people with. Speaking with this white mage causes her to run and hide in the bushes. And this white mage explains to Cecil that he has no idea just how much trauma he has inflicted upon this small town. It's honestly quite hard to read. The player's recollection and initial emotional response to Cecil's opening has probably dulled since the beginning, but going through the town and talking to everyone reminds us starkly just how serious what he did is. Speaking with the elder of the village, he sees in Cecil the most important component anyone, including in real life, needs to attain forgiveness, change. Informing the elder of his situation, he recognizes what is happening. This is a test. A test from either the King of Summons Leviathan or a test from the world itself. I'll quickly note, by the way, when I refer to the world of Final Fantasy IV, I want to speak of it as if it were a character in the story, just as important as our party members. See, at the moment, I don't have enough evidence to justify the claim. I need to play games like Final Fantasy VII to get it, but the world in Final Fantasy games is just as much a character as anyone. Again, not going to go into it, but if you've also played these games, have a think about that statement, because I think I could argue that pretty confidently. Anyways, the Elder notes that Cecil's current reliance on the Dark Sword will only darken his soul, something we have already seen happen. To avoid this, there is only one thing Cecil can do. He must head to Mount Ordeals and undergo a legendary trial no one has yet to return from alive. There, he can reverse the current course of his fate and become who he was born to be, a paladin. Upon agreeing, feeling he must do this, the Elder grants grants us the assistance of two prodigious mages, the twins Palom and Porom. Both specialize in a different type of magic, one black and the other white. Porom, the girl with the green cape, is characterized as a sensible, straight man of the pair. She has a unique action in combat to cry, which can halve enemy defenses, also indicating to the player that under her strictness towards her brother, she is still just a kid. Then there is Palom, the boy in the red cape. He can bluff the enemy, boosting his magic attack. And again, this further goes to build his character as the cheeky, mischievous kid we see in the story. And finally, both Palom and Porom share the move Twin Cast. If both of the twins have a full ATB bar, you can cast this, spending both their ATB. This delivers a devastating magic attack that far surpasses everything we've had up to this point. But guess what? That makes sense. They're introduced in the story as twin prodigies, so it makes total sense that they have a really strong move that makes them special. I'm telling you, man, the integration between story and gameplay is so damn good. With these two in tow, we make our way to Mount Ordeals, where we find Teller has beaten us there. He is here to find the secret to unlock the legendary spell Meteor. He believes that it is enough to take down Golbez, even if it kills him in the process. As we make our way up Mount Ordeals, I think we've seen enough of it to talk about this game's approach towards party members and how they come in and out of use. The closest point of comparison here is Final Fantasy II. So, for anyone who isn't aware how it works in that game, I'll give a quick recap. Final Fantasy II has 3 mainstay party members who you always have, and the last spot rotates between a ton of characters. The system had pros and cons. The benefit lied in its influence on the story. Final Fantasy II understood that fighting alongside characters for an extended period of time endeared them to the player just by itself, separate from characterization and writing. The cons, however, lied in gameplay. Having 3 mainstays and 1 temporary party member discouraged me from investing any resources into the temp, especially since the game was so easy I didn't need to. I would just kill them off as soon as they entered the party, so the main 3 would get experience. The negative effects of this are probably self-explanatory, but the TLDR is it is not good game design to encourage me not to use all my party members. Overall, I'm more negative about the system than positive. But coming back to Final Fantasy IV, I'm the opposite. I really like the adaptation of the FF2 approach they did here. As we've seen, in Final Fantasy IV, characters will join and leave our party frequently. Other than Cecil, the story frames every character as temporary. When only one character is temporary, I'll treat them as such. But when everyone is temporary, no one is. I need every character I can get to be FF4 because the game is properly balanced around what party composition you will have at any given time. But this is only one of the positive effects on story and gameplay this upgraded approach has. For the story, it makes you actually feel like you are meeting and working with a diverse group of people from around the world of Final Fantasy IV, and this bleeds into gameplay. Having the party switch frequently is a great way to offset the lack of choice the player has about jobs. Final Fantasy IV has the least amount of player choice so far when it comes to what jobs they use and how they play. Even Final Fantasy I let you choose your starting party, but Final Fantasy IV feels so much more expansive because you are trying out so many unique jobs. It's like switching from a buffet to a 4-course meal. A buffet isn't better because you can choose what you eat. Those 4 courses can be tailor-made to make you feel like you've experienced just as much variety. As we near the peak, we're taken to a cutscene of Golbez. He's sending one of his 4 elemental archfiends, Skarmleone. Yes, fucking nailed that. To dispose of Cecil. There isn't much of note in this boss fight. Probably the weakest of the 4 fiends, but even saying that feels weird because it's still a fun boss. I got to rip and tear through him with Twin Cast, which felt pretty cool. But anyways, no messing around, Locke and Adiris. It's time for the best and most iconic moment in Final Fantasy IV. Interacting with the glowing pedestal takes Cecil to a strange room. In it, a wall of mirrors, reflecting straight back at Cecil the Dark Knight he is. A voice manifests, saying he will give Cecil his power, passing along a glowing sword that when taken bursts light from him. He is transformed in this moment from a Dark Knight into a Paladin. But it doesn't end there. To become a Paladin, Cecil needs to, in the words of the game, break from your past and overcome the darkness. You must defeat the Dark Knight within you. In other words, Cecil needs to atone for what he has done as a Dark Knight and more importantly, find forgiveness in himself. In the mirror, a Paladin isn't reflected. The Dark Knight is still there. Our party offers to help, but Cecil understands what this is. This isn't a fight, it's atonement. In the following battle, no matter how much damage you do to the Dark Knight, you can't kill him. You, the player, may be confused about what you must do to overcome this trial. Then, the same voice that granted Cecil this power rings, saying those immortal words, "A true paladin would sheath his sword." We know what we must do. A paladin does not attack. It doesn't massacre and plunder. It defends. It protects. It sheathes its sword to take up a shield used to protect the ones the paladin loves. By embodying the paladin Cecil was born to be, the dark knight inside him fades. The darkness he once embodied becomes the light that fuels his power. In the mirror now, a paladin. Now, do I even need to say this, or can we all just agree this moment is amazing? I can't emphasize enough just how important this moment is, not only to Final Fantasy IV, but to Final Fantasy as a whole. As we get on in games, something I'm going to talk about more and more is the Final Fantasy protagonist. It's one of the most important roles in every game it's in. They are the medium of that game's main theme or message, and the strength of that character is paramount. They also embody a very similar thing, change. I won't talk about it now, but it's something I'll be thinking about going forward. Cecil becoming a paladin is also a big moment for this video. Even though we are about a third of the way through the game, I mentally can't help myself but mark this as the halfway point. The reason for that being just how much meat there is in this part of the game. It feels so full of themes and metaphors, amazing storytelling years ahead of its time. And then we compare that to the second part, which is comparatively lean. Of course, we're going to get some very important payoffs and cool story development, but it will take double the time to deliver just as much meat. So, as we say goodbye to the extremely positive part of this video to go into the mostly negative one, let's do a mini conclusion. The first half of Final Fantasy IV is, with no exaggeration, visionary. To go from what we played in Final Fantasy 1 through 3 to this, there is no better word for it. Those three pillars I established in my FF3 video as the Final Fantasy core set up in the foundational era are on full display. Exploration is more fun than ever in a world more fleshed out and interesting. Characters are, needless to say, incredible, with deep emotional turmoil, relatable themes, and well-defined character arcs. And the job system is used masterfully to not only provide variety and engagement in gameplay, but to help us better understand characters and their personalities. This half of the game deserves all the applause in the world. Truly a special experience. However, as a wise man once said, there ain't no getting off of this train. We're in this till the end. It's time to cover the second half of Final Fantasy IV. This part, going from now to just before the final dungeon where we get a generational comeback, feels like I'm playing a foundational era Final Fantasy again. Characters lose a lot of identity, their arcs and the arcs of new characters stall. To repeat myself, the story feels like it covers just as much as the first half but in double the time. Then there are dungeons, which rapidly become boring, feeling like repeats both visually and layout wise. But we'll cover all this as we go along. For now, we are back in Mysidia. After a weird reveal that Palom and Porum were sent to spy on us, like, come on, of course they were, we literally massacred this town a few weeks ago, the Elder notices our sword. It is here we get the first recital of this game's prophecy, a story about one born of a dragon who carries both light and dark rising to the heavens. There's also that bit about the moon's light, gonna be so real with you, I don't know what that means in relation to the story, but you know, cool story bro, thanks I guess. Cecil asks the Elder if he knows why the voice in the mountain called him son, but he doesn't get an answer. For now though, our short-term mission is clear: to return to Baron, commandeer an airship and defeat Golbez. To get there, we take the Devil's Path from Mysidia direct to Baron Town. In the inn, we see Yang, but he's been put under the spell of Golbez and is commanding a troop of Baron's soldiers. We defeat him in battle, breaking him out of the spell before rejoining the party. When he was given command of the troops, Baron entrusted him with a key to the old waterway connecting the town to the castle. So, Cecil, Tala, Palom, Porum and Yang all infiltrate the waterway. It was at this point where I was starting to get a little annoyed. The old waterway marks another cave dungeon. While certain additions to dungeons, like the really cool background for the underground waterway, do add to a dungeon style, the look of the actual dungeon itself being visually distinct is much more important. I'll do this again later when I do a bigger talk on dungeons, but here's the tally. So far, Mist Cave, the underground waterway, the Antlion's Den and the old waterway have been the same dungeon, with the underground and old waterways literally being the same thing. That's not all though. Mount Hobbs and Mount Ordeals are also the same dungeon. It's a really bad sign that we are already repeating dungeons. This will get a lot worse. But until then, we arrive at Baron Castle searching for Sid, the airship engineer we met in the opening. While searching, we meet Baigan, another returning face. He was the guy who poisoned the king with suspicion that Cecil was disloyal. In an obvious fake out, he pretends to have changed his ways. The game really thinks it's slick trying to trick us with this Baigan has joined the party. Palom and Porum also remember there's only 5 party members at a time, calling Baigan out and triggering a boss fight. The Baigan fight is an especially awesome fight in a game full of them. There are 3 targets: the main body, his left arm and his right arm. The main body will try and maintain and reflect on itself the whole time, meaning we must only hit it with Cecil or Yang. Meanwhile, his left arm will cast Constrict, paralyzing whoever it connects with. His right arm will cast Blood Feast, a drain move that deals damage while healing itself. At the same time, each part can also attack the party normally. If you kill both arms, Baigan will instantly regenerate them both. All of this can be figured out with relative ease in the fight, and from here we can strategize. If we kill only one arm, he won't regenerate it, so we can choose if we want to disable his Constrict or Blood Feast. Then there's bypassing Bygone's Reflect. While we can't just leave it to our physical damage dealers, we could also cast Reflect on one of our own party members, then bounce our magic off of it to hit Bygone. You see, this actually bypasses his Reflect, giving us an opening to hit him with magic. I mean, come on, this is already more strategizing than 99% of bosses from the Foundational era. Hell, I'll even say it's more than 100% of them. It's awesome to see this evolution in boss design. I'll say it again, in isolation, it's this game's greatest achievement. Putting Bygone to bed, we can make our way to the throne room to find the king. Or at least, we think it's the king. It turns out he is being impersonated by the second archfiend, Cagnazzo. It isn't clear for how long Cagnazzo has been impersonating the king, and I wish that discussion wasn't dropped after this encounter. Was it the real king, Cecil's adoptive father, who betrayed the trust Cecil put in Baron? Or was it Cagnazzo who sent him into the Spiral of Darkness? It's a shame this isn't really addressed, even by the real king we find much later into the game. Cagnazzo is relatively straightforward. When he brings up his torrents of water, we can cast lightning for super effective damage, while we should avoid hitting him in his shell where he gains a resistance to all damage and can heal himself. With Teller, this fight is a breeze. The second archfiend goes down and the balance of power in the world is shifted. After this, Baron practically ceases to be a threat. Golbez becomes a force completely independent from the kingdom. I think this works well for Cecil's story. Becoming a paladin is the metaphorical shedding of the role Baron had as a devil on his shoulder. Leading a raid and defeating the imposter king can be seen as the figurative slaying of that devil once and for all. Cecil's goal is no longer personal absolution, but to save and protect the world. With Cagnazzo down, Sid bursts into the room, introducing himself to the current party and the story as a whole again. As he takes us to his airship he has hidden away, Cagnazzo springs a trap. The walls close in on the party. Trapped and unsure what to do, burn the door down. Palom and Porom step up to the plate, turning themselves into stones to stop the walls from closing in. If we've learned anything from our journey through this early game so far, it's that Final Fantasy loves characters dying as a sacrifice. For like the past 3 games, we lose, in massive inverted commas by the way, characters who die for a greater purpose. Final Fantasy 2 does this really well. I still think it's the most well done character deaths in the series so far. Final Fantasy 3 was fine. It was a game with a very light-hearted tone, so the fake out deaths didn't really matter. Then we get to Final Fantasy 4. When the game starts pulling some Houdini tricks to bring characters back, I'll go into depth why death is treated really poorly in this game, because we'll have seen some evidence. But for now, just know it sucks. But regardless of what we know will happen, this moment with the twins, in isolation, is good. It's a cool and creative way to sacrifice yourself, and it's believable that they can be brought back later if they aren't kept dead. Before we are let loose for the first time, we have a cutscene again with Golbez and Kain. I really appreciate that they keep doing this. A real issue I have with many games, both old and new, is when the main villain isn't a presence in the story. How am I meant to be invested in fighting a villain if they aren't around? Sure, there's a thematic element to a villain that doesn't need presence to achieve, but I still greatly appreciate seeing them throughout the story act against our heroes. In this scene, Kain offers a plan to Golbez. They will trick Cecil and friends into retrieving the crystal from Troya for them, using Rosa to force them to comply. When leaving, Kain is stopped by Rosa. She calls out to him, only for Kain to reveal his true motivations. He wants to prove to her that he is superior to Cecil, the real man deserving of Rosa's love. While this is obviously something Kain would never say when not under Golbez's mind control, we already know from Fabul that this comes from a real place within him. I can't help but feel pity for Kain. He gets it rough in this story. Returning to our crew, we unlock the Enterprise, a callback to the airship from Final Fantasy 3. Going airborne for the first time, we are immediately greeted by a single red ship commanded by Kain. He boards the Enterprise and lays out his demands to Cecil. Try as they might to call out to Kain, he doesn't respond. Only Rosa reaches him. Our objective now is clear. We must journey to Troya, get the crystal in their possession, preferably without plunder this time, and use it to save Rosa. But before we do that, this marks the first time in Final Fantasy 4 we are able to explore almost the entire world map unbound. Exploration is one of the big 3 components of Final Fantasy, and I haven't talked much on it yet, mostly because it's pretty much what we've already seen in Final Fantasy 1 and 3. As we progress through the game, we unlock more vehicles, or, in the case of Final Fantasy 4, upgrades to vehicles that slowly but surely open up every inch of the world map for exploration. The scope of the journey starts small, then balloons into the globetrotting adventure to save the world. It's the tried and tested formula Final Fantasy is really starting to get good at by FF4. So far, we've gone from walking to having a hovercraft to using a ship and now the airship. Each step expands the scope of our adventure at a pace that means we constantly feel like we are experiencing new stuff, and there's a lot more to come. While it isn't on the scale of Final Fantasy 3's reveal, this game does have 2 other distinct world maps to explore. They aren't as strong as the base overworld map, but still add a lot to making the world feel richer. But more on those when we get there. For now, I take a look around, going back to Myth, missed visiting a ruined castle in Eblan to the south, where I got my ass absolutely handed to me. Then the town of Agard, and finally Mithril, a really cool location where the people are a unique status element. The houses are also unique in that you can go into them but aren't taken into a separate screen. You're just hidden in the house. It's a cool compromise between wanting to make the towns feel alive with explorable houses but not having the resources to make every house have an interior. It's something only a 2D game can do. Overall, we discovered some important locations here. Definitely need to keep it in mind as we end our mini adventure by arriving in Troya. Troya is a play on the myth of the Amazonians, the society sequestered in the forest being run and ruled by women. Or, well, it's meant to be. The female warriors replacing their male, yellow armor-clad counterparts have the same sprites as the dancers you can find around the world. Then there's the brothel you can find that caters to men. The game so far has been doing a great job of showing, not telling the player a lot of this stuff, but Troya really drops the ball here. If I wasn't told this was meant to be a spoof of the Amazonians, I'd be guessing very differently as to the nature of this place. All that aside, Troya is actually home to this game's, I won't say greatest, technically advanced dance yet. If we pay 10,000 gil, holy shit, to get a membership pass, Cecil is treated to a private dance from the ladies. It's the most expressive dance we've seen in the series yet, with jumps and turns, them dragging Cecil onto the stage. It even made me chuckle just a little when Cecil looked down embarrassed. But moving along, we reach the castle and are given the situation from the 8 prophets inside. They say if we are able to kill the Dark Elf, a returning enemy from Final Fantasy I, who has stolen their crystal, they will let us borrow it. Before we head off, if we explore a bit, we can find Edward chilling in the infirmary. He was shipwrecked near Troya and has been recovering here since. He is currently too sick to join the party on any more adventures and so stays behind. Edward never joins the party again. Probably for the best, honestly, because holy shit, he was ass in combat, god damn. Leaving his ass on the bench, we make our way to the metallic cavern by flying on a black chocobo needed to land on the trees covering the entrance to the dungeon. The metallic cave is the only dungeon in this game with a unique mechanic we haven't already seen before in this series. It's a shame it sucks. Actually, so does the carryover from FF1. They didn't suck there, but damn, they were bad this time. But I'll leave that crash out for later. For now, the metallic cavern. So the gimmick here is that we can't wear or equip anything metallic. Now, if our party was what it was before getting the Enterprise, aka 3 mages, it would be a lot more manageable. Unfortunately, that isn't the case. Right now we have 3 frontliners. Only one of them I can actually properly equip, and Tala, who by this point is really beginning to feel the squeeze in terms of being limited to 90 MP. Needless to say, this was a very rough dungeon difficulty wise. The random encounters weren't too bad, but the boss, holy shit. So when we get to him, we get diddled by a spell of his. This triggers Edward's power of friendship meter, alerting him we are in trouble as he goes to get his special harp. He then plays a very familiar song. It was the same song he played for Anna that night on the Oasis in Kaipo. It's a really cool touch to farewell his character on, a full circle moment. The song then replaces the first half of the boss battle theme before the proper boss theme starts back up, kind of like the moment that will not be specified for spoiler reasons from FF7 Rebirth. This is the second hardest fight in the game. The Dark Elf has access to some really powerful moves, like Tornado, which can instantly set a party member's HP to single digits, Hex, which can turn you into a pig, an AoE magic combo that combined with his Tornado can be brutal, all on top of a high magic resistance. He also has a phase 2, transforming into the Dark Dragon, another really powerful enemy. I think the main reason for the tough time was because of Tala. That 90 MP limitation was debilitating for me in this dungeon. I was out of ethers and elixirs come this boss fight, so I had to do this with Cecil as the main healer, which, needless to say, didn't go well. But I eked out a victory in my most clutch win of all of these games so far. Cecil just running out of MP the moment before the last attack put the Dark Dragon down. Returning to Troya, we get a cute moment with Tala promising Edward to avenge Anna for the both of them. There wasn't much meat to this character arc and relationship dynamic, so this moment isn't super noticeable, but it's still sweet. With the crystal in hand, we are immediately greeted by the familiar red airship. We hand it over and are taken to the base of the Tower of Zot, which we must ascend to rescue Rosa, as well as, hopefully, Kane. As we make our way up, I want to talk about this game's OST a bit more generally. So far, I've talked a little on some of the great elements that are universal to the original and Pixel Remaster's soundtrack. However, I don't think these two soundtracks are made equally, and what I think is better than the other may surprise you. Now, I know music is completely subjective, so feel free to tell me I'm wrong, but I don't love the soundtrack of the Final Fantasy IV Pixel Remaster. I just think a lot of the songs are more subdued. It's hard for me to articulate why I don't like a song versus why I like one, so I'll just state a possible theory for why I don't love it and move on. I suspect, big emphasis on the suspect, that the sound team behind the Pixel Remaster were kind of put between a rock and a hard place. You have the beloved soundtrack of the original Final Fantasy IV. Uematsu got so many new tools at his disposal and it really shows. With some of these songs, you can easily make out the imitations of instruments, like the drums of the Red Wings theme or the flutes of the World Map theme. I think that, combined with the pressure to be faithful faithful to the original's OST, this was maybe limiting to the Pixel Remaster team, but regardless of the reason, I think the outcome is simple. I, generally, prefer the original SNES versions to the Pixel Remaster counterpart. To sound more pretentious than I already have in this video, it's like the soundtrack of Final Fantasy IV was made with the limitations of the time in mind, and it struggled to translate into the modern day. Anyways, they don't make them like they used to, ask rant aside, we approach the peak of the Tower of Zot. However, we are stopped by an amazing boss fight, the Major Sisters. Each sister has a separate role to play in the fight, and it is up to the player to figure out what the best order is to take them down. The fight works like so. Mindy will constantly be casting Reflect on Cindy, regardless of if she has it on her or not, while Sandy coordinates a Delta attack, a random Ara level spell, off of Cindy and onto the party. If any of the sisters die, Cindy will instantly cast a revive on them. From that line, the kill order is probably clear, but the only way to figure that out is to have her revive somebody in the first place. This is where Sandy comes in. As the smallest, the one in the front, and the one coordinating Delta attack, the player is likely to gravitate to killing her first. But from this mistake, they learn of Cindy's revive, putting the pieces together themselves to come up with a strategy to win the fight. Or, if you're cheeky, you can cast a spell on Cindy while the Delta attack is being cast, having the sisters hit themselves. I seriously can't reiterate enough just how much of an improvement this is from the Foundational era. It's insane just how much bosses are improved. Taking them down and proceeding, we have a confrontation with Golbez, handing him the crystal before enacting what he planned with Cain, double-crossing us. Tala takes charge here, entering a scripted battle with Golbez to avenge Anna. The ensuing battle is awesome. Tala tries a variety of spells on Golbez, but they don't hurt the towering spire of purple metal. That is, until he casts the spell the game has been hyping up as the ultimate spell, Meteor. We see the awesome animation for it before hitting the damage cap on Golbez, triggering a death animation, but this would be a very short game if he died here. He's fine, albeit weakened. Tala, on the other hand, true to what the game has told, is dead from casting this spell. Tala marks the only actual character death in this game. His presence will be directly felt again in the party's moment of need, but he is properly dead here. And good. It's fitting for his character to die here. His purpose in the story is served. His arc completed. Kill him off. I really wish the game did this with more characters. Death is a great end for a character like Tala's arc, as they can help signify the importance and impact of the final action the character makes or the cause they were fighting for. Cecil, enraged, attacks Golbez, but is stricken down by a lightning attack. Standing over Cecil now, we get some very interesting dialogue from Golbez, a question and exclamation mark. Cecil helps elaborate on what's happening for the player. Golbez isn't finishing Cecil off. He's sparing him, and he is in pain doing so. He soon exits the room, leaving the question open as to why he was spared. From the way the game presents this, you can put together it's more complex than him being damaged by Meteor, but that doesn't answer the question of why. Does it have something to do with the voice calling Cecil's son on Mount Ordeals, or is it something separate? The reason will be made clear later, but you know what this is? Foreshadowing! Actual foreshadowing in a Final Fantasy game. Back in my day, we were just surprised with a crazy time travel narrative or a big fucking cloud being the bad guy, but not in the Visionary era. The storytelling has noticeably leveled up, and it's moments like this that really sell that. In Control again, we go over to Cain. Tala's Meteor didn't just damage Golbez physically, it broke his connection to the people he was directly mind controlling. Speaking with him, he is immediately apologetic. While he was under Golbez's control, a part of him was awake, aware, in the slightest bit of control. It was that part we saw cry out when it came to Rosa's safety. Said safety being what gets both men to rush to the room she's being kept. Knowing this only further developed what we've already uncovered, that Cain's main motivation, what he cares about most, is Rosa. Speaking of, we save her from a trap just moments before it goes off. An incredible character building detail here, just before Rosa and Cecil have their kiss, Cain turning away. He can't look. Is Cain looking away because he can't watch the woman he loves kiss another man, or is it because he is ashamed by what he has done? There's plausible deniability, sure, but it's definitely more likely than not an inappropriate love is the stronger reason of the two. When speaking to Cain, he claims the latter. He is deeply ashamed for what he has done, but with the encouragement of Rosa and Cecil, they agree to fight together. The White Mage and Dragoon have rejoined the party, and it looks like we'll get to try them out right away. We are ambushed by the third elemental archfiend, Barbarisha. To beat her, we must take advantage of Cain's abilities. When she enters her violent winds form, it can be broken only by Cain's jump. Without the winds, she is vulnerable to normal attacks from the party. So, following that strategy, we take her down with relative ease. But, as is the case with all the archfiends, she doesn't die easy. She triggers the destruction of the Tower of Zot, which Rosa is just barely able to teleport us out of. Back in Baron, before we despair too hard for losing all 4 crystals to Golbez, Cain reveals that there are actually 8 crystals total. He tells us of the dark crystals located in the underworld are not to Final Fantasy III, giving us the magma rock which can act as the key to open the way. But he doesn't know where this gate is. We will need to search the world on the Enterprise to find the location. I really love this approach. The best Final Fantasy games invite exploration in interesting ways. Cool visual design, awesome world building, or a really strong plot. This is a very direct way of achieving this end, but still familiar. The Foundational era forced exploration in a similar way. However, it was done through a lack of guidance on where to go next. But this is a very deliberate, an intentional nudge to go explore the world. It's an approach a lot of modern day open world games take, making it all the cooler it was used back in 1991. Fast forwarding a little, I recall there being a suspicious well in the town of Agat, a place that had little purpose when I first visited, so I tried going there. Interacting with it, we drop the magma rock in, blasting a massive hole in the nearby mountain range. We fly down into it, entering the second world map of the game, the Underworld. As I mentioned earlier, I think this is a little bit weaker of a world map compared to the overworlds. I think it suffers from a lack of location variety. There's a castle, which we've seen before, the entrance to the Tower of Babel, the insides of which we've seen before. There are these 2 optional dungeons with the same design but colour swapped, not to mention another cave dungeon. It's all just a bit repetitive, but all of this isn't felt until we look at this area in retrospect. For now, we can enjoy the change in scenery. That is until we come across a dangerous situation. The Red Wings and a division of tanks are locked in a battle, with us at the centre. This crashes our airship right next to a castle, the next major settlement of the game, the Dwarven Castle. By the way, you get a gold star and a pat on the back if you recognise this scenario. It's the exact same one used in Final Fantasy III to introduce its coolest town, Saronia. Entering the castle, we make our way to King Gyot, a very unfortunate name by the way, who tells us it was his tanks that were battling the Red Wings in a desperate last stand to protect one of the remaining 2 dark crystals in the castle's possession. When the king suggests that we use our airship to help defend the crystal, Sid is given his mission of repairing it. He sets off to the surface. God knows how he's going to get up there, but hey, that wouldn't even be the most unbelievable thing he does in the story. After telling us the crystal's location, Yang senses a presence. A little girl can be seen moving around in the darkness behind the wall. Rushing into the crystal room, we see 4 dolls. They are the Calcabrinas, who Golbez is tasked with taking the dark crystal. This boss isn't too complicated mechanically other than it hitting like a truck, but they do have a cool phase 1 and 2 split. First, we battle 6 separated dolls by the names Calco and Brina. Then they merge into the one big doll, Calcabrina. Taking it down, we think we are in the clear until Golbez teleports right at the foot of the crystal. Before battling us, he tells us of his true motive. He is searching for all 8 crystals in order to unlock the power of the Tower of Babel, a teleporter that can act as a pathway to the moon, where it is said an ultimate power lays hidden. A relatively simple motive, the bad guy wants to get more powerful, but that simplicity isn't a bad thing by any means. If this were the whole story, nothing I have said regarding Golbez's role as Cecil's shadow becomes invalid. He is still a powerful metaphor for Cecil's path not taken, and so the fight begins, immediately biting us before summoning his shadow dragon, who insta-kills Yang, then Kane, and finally Rosa with its black fang. But before he can deal the finishing blow to Cecil, in a moment I regard as being equally, if not more legendary than Cecil becoming a paladin, we see a move pop up on screen, and it's not Black Fang. It's Mist Breath. Suddenly, the Mist Dragon appears on screen, instantly killing the Shadow Dragon. Cecil is cured of his paralysis, and a familiar green figure joins the 5th empty slot in the party. Rydia has returned. The music instantly shifts into the boss theme as we begin our recovery. Using this chance, Rydia has brought us to kill Golbez. You know, it's moments like these that make playing this game sequentially so special. These moments of just pure genius, when all the puzzle pieces the game has set up fit together so perfectly, and you can see, like a proud dad, just how much better it's done than previous efforts. Let's look at this moment from surface level to English teacher level deep. At a glance, this is just a really cool moment. Seeing Cecil saved by a party member we thought we had lost is just cool. I also really like that she doesn't instantly raise everyone. It not only makes our victory feel more, I don't know, gritty I guess is the word, but also makes the moment at the end of the game where everyone is down and gets up through extra magical means all the more special. Okay, layer 2. Rydia returning and saving us with the Mist Dragon is just such a home run of a choice. The game could have had her use any summon, but the choice of the Mist Dragon was super intentional. Remember at the start of the game, our first proper boss was this same Mist Dragon. Remember how killing that boss is what killed Rydia's mother? In returning here to save Cecil and Kane in our hour of need is an awesome development of the overarching theme of forgiveness forgiveness running through Final Fantasy IV. Cecil especially has dramatically changed from the man he was back in Mist Cave. He has atoned for his wrongs in Mysidia, but there is still a wrong he hasn't atoned for, gotten forgiveness for, killing Rydia's mother. This moment marks that forgiveness being granted, being offered a helping hand from the Mist Dragon that Cecil previously slew, an offer he takes. Now, for the final layer. This moment is the culmination of Rydia's personal character arc. Earlier in the video, I said for Rydia to complete her arc, two things needed to happen. She needed to overcome the grief of losing her home and to find forgiveness for Cecil. While she completed the first of those by learning the fire spell on Mount Hobbs, here she achieves the second one. Losing her mother would be the most traumatic moment in her life, and the Mist Dragon is, literally, her mother made manifest. So, Rydia using her mother to protect Cecil in a moment she could have easily let him die as punishment for Mist is a major metaphorical representation of her giving Cecil fully her forgiveness. It's really such an incredible moment. For all the problems I have with FF4's second half, I can't deny that after stepping away from the game to write this video, it's these moments of brilliance that stick with me much more than some of the game's low points. But I wouldn't be doing my job here if I didn't properly cover everything this game has to offer. So let's continue onwards. In case you hadn't gathered already, Rydia is back, and different too. When she was thrown off the boat, she was swallowed by Leviathan, the King of Summons, and taken back to the land of the Summons. There, time passes much quicker than in the real world, meaning for us what has been, a few weeks, a month maybe, for Rydia has been at least a decade. This is an amazing way to give a power up to a character that hasn't been in the story for a while. It's super believable and interesting. Reading Rydia's story, I'm reminded about how I felt towards Doga and his story about Noah's gifts with Xand in Final Fantasy III. That same feeling of intense interest, like I'm reading the climax of an Ace Attorney case. I just can't take my eyes away. With her in tow now, we make our way out, only to see a shocking and kinda silly reveal. Golbez isn't dead. He turned into, wait for it, an evil hand. Oh no! And the hand makes away with the Dark Crystal. Looking at this moment really generously, I guess this is meant to represent how Golbez has lost all his humanity to the darkness. Not even a person anymore and only an evil force. But the game will contradict this narrative later, so I don't know, man. Golbez always getting away with stealing the crystals is just a goofy recurring plot point of Final Fantasy IV. We'll see another goofy moment like this very soon. Speaking of, let's make some story progress now, eh? Talking with the king again, he tries to ease our worries by telling us the final crystal is secured in the sealed cavern. Instead of protecting this crystal that Golbez is surely on his way to retrieve, he asks us to instead steal the 7 that Golbez already has, sequestered away in the Tower of Babel. He will command a distraction with his tank division while we sneak our way in. It's really cool to approach the Tower of Babel, as we can recognize it as the same large tower sticking out of the earth on the southwestern continent of the overworld. It's a really cool idea that we're climbing such a large spire. Unfortunately, that coolness begins and ends with the idea. Going inside, it's an exact replica of the Tower of Zot. I brought this up before and I'll definitely be bringing it up again, but one of this game's biggest issues is the lack of cool dungeon visual design. As cliched as 4 elemental based dungeons were in Final Fantasy I would take the Shrunken Temple or Mount Golg or Citadel of Trials or Floating Fortress every day over what this game has to offer. Every Final Fantasy game we've done so far has only gone to show how extraordinarily ahead of its time Final Fantasy I was in this regard. It's a shame Final Fantasy IV doesn't push the ball forward in this regard like it does so many other elements. Anyways, after what I want to say is the second longest dungeon in the game, we approach the top as we see a mad scientist teleport the last elemental fiend, Rubicante, back to the surface. Wherever he is going, he takes solace in the ninjas of Eblan being wiped out. Some cool, minor foreshadowing to keep in mind given we meet Rubicante again later there. But even with him gone, the scientist, Dr. Lugay, still poses a threat. We fight him in a pretty funny battle. We see his creation, Barnabas, do pitifully little damage while Lugay yells at it. All the while, we wail on him, taking him down. But he isn't done, as he transforms into a robotic monstrosity, the true boss fight just beginning. He isn't that tough of a boss. All he will do with these gas attacks that inflict some mildly annoying statuses. Oh, and this laser attack that can insta-kill any of us, but that's rarely cast, and we can always recover with Rosa or Phoenix Downs. Before dying, Lugay activates the tower's cannons, which we rush to stop. However, before we can finish off the goblins, they destroy the controls, so we can't stop them. A side note, but what is with these characters dying in battle just to do something after it and only then die? Like, dude, that isn't how death works. If you dissolve in the battle, you dissolve in the cutscene. But, well, it's pretty fitting for this game for no one to die. Speaking of, figuring out the best option, Yang just randomly says, "Leave this to me," before kicking us out of the room. Like, Yang, why? Why did you sacrifice yourself like that, dude? I mean, what are you even gonna do? Punch the cannons? Not to mention, after this sacrifice scene, our main party's only reaction is Cecil yelling, "Yang!" Didn't want to say anything else, guys? Cecil, he's been the mainstay of our journey from, like, the beginning. Actually, wait, no. Maybe Cecil read the script for the game and knew he was fine. Luckily, characters sacrificing themselves aren't gonna get any sillier. No, wait, sorry. I just read the script for Final Fantasy IV and realized they do. That's awesome. Super excited. Moving on. I was kind of confused after this cutscene. When I tried to teleport out of the dungeon, I couldn't, so I assumed we still needed to do something in here. There wasn't any real guidance on what to do after Yang's death, so I kind of just ended up slightly aimlessly exploring the dungeon looking for anything I missed. That wasn't until I made it to the bottom, where I realized the reason we couldn't teleport was there was a cutscene waiting for us at the entrance to the tower. You know what's crazy though? I think that's intentional. I think the player is meant to walk around aimlessly, getting some levels in the process, then go to the bottom. The only piece of evidence I have is right at the very end of the game, and I want to save that discussion for when we get there. But keep in mind as we go through these dungeons that the number of random encounters you need to do to finish the game naturally are more than what you are going to do naturally exploring a dungeon. In the cutscene at the bottom, we are ambushed by Golbez, who tries to drop the pathway out from underneath us. We are only barely saved by Sid, who has repaired the Enterprise. In hot pursuit by an upgraded Red Wings fleet, we make our way back up to the surface. But Sid has a plan. So, unprompted, Sid decided it would be a good idea to fucking jump off the airship mid-air to block the entrance to the underground. Sid, you're an engineer who can make airships in like days. You would know how bombs work. Just throw it off the airship. What the hell is this? If this were Final Fantasy III, this would be awesome. It's a really funny death that is totally unnecessary. But this game's story isn't the tone of Final Fantasy III. It's trying to be the same tone of Final Fantasy II. A serious, contemplative story tackling deep emotional guilt and trauma, mainly relating to death. So, to completely gut the emotional pain from our main party character's death like Sid's is a real disservice to the game's greater themes. And even good deaths and sacrifices, like Pelham's and Porom's, or even Yang's or Edward's to a lesser extent, are completely invalidated when the game keeps them alive and brings them back later. There's no need for it. Their role in the story is done. They don't rejoin the party, just grow some balls and kill them. Anyways, after a really funny comment from Kane that people kill themselves too quick, which they do, you're so right, King, we return to Baron to have the Enterprise outfitted with a hook. I only briefly mentioned it, but earlier in the game we got a hovercraft which was used briefly to glide over rocky waters. We have seen similar waters on different continents while exploring the world map, so with the hook we can go and explore them. This includes Eblin Cave, the location mentioned by Luge to have been wiped out, the home of the ninjas. Proceeding through Eblin Cave, another cave dungeon by the way, yippee! We come across a ninja locked in battle with Rubicante. He loses his fight, allowing Rubicante to escape before we get there. Speaking with him, Rydia has a really sad moment where she recalls all of the people she has seen die, saying she can't take anyone else dying. I love Rydia's character, and this quote has weight to it given what we've seen from her childhood and throughout the game. But our newest party member, Edge, immediately goes and fucks all that peak storytelling up by immediately establishing himself as a raging flirt, hitting on Rydia while she cries about the friends she has lost. I mean, what? And you want me to like this character game? Edge marks the final main party character. By that, I refer to the party we see through to the end of the game. So, luckily for him, he will grow in the player just by virtue of time spent with him. But still, what a poor introduction. Speaking of introductions, if you recall from earlier in the video, I used to go into a character's job when they joined and how it helps build up their character. Unfortunately, like many of the themes and motifs that make the first half of Final Fantasy IV so great, this through line is dropped by the second half. I mean, what am I supposed to gather about Edge from him being a ninja and being a ninja from Edge? That ninjas are impudent princes who shirk responsibility while being pervy? It was a real shame to realize this while playing. By this point, I was making the comment while taking notes on the game that while Final Fantasy IV is objectively the best Final Fantasy yet, I don't think it is my favorite. Very luckily for me, the ending hours really bring it back, and it is my favorite of the games I've played so far. But I really want to impart on you just how much of a low point for this otherwise very great game this second half is. Making our way onwards, guess what? We're back in the Tower of Babel. Let's go! I love exploring dungeons I've already explored before. Thank you, Final Fantasy IV. Whatever. While we work our way through the dungeon again, let's take a moment to quickly talk about any lingering points I still need to cover in relation to the item economy. Mainly, we will be talking about ethers and elixirs and how the player's approach to these items has changed dramatically throughout the game. For a big slice of the early second half, we had Tala in our party. It was here that the cap placed in his MP really started hurting us. I remember around the Tower of Zot feeling like he was bordering on unusable just because of how much ethers I needed to keep this guy with a usable amount of MP. MP. It also didn't help that he was responsible for most of the black and white magic. However, since then, we have replaced him with Rosa and Rydia. As you can see right now, they have a ton of MP to pull from. Even Rosa, right after rescuing her, has nearly double Teller's max MP. This really changed how I approached items in this part of the game. They become even less valuable. Ethan's went from a, yo, let's go, great find, to nothing, no reaction. Obviously, being less excited about finding items is a bad thing, but the damage definitely extended to how I felt about dungeons. In Final Fantasy III, we found a deep connection between an engaging item economy and interesting dungeons. That same connection hurts Final Fantasy IV, where it aided Final Fantasy III. The second and final extra point I want to make around the item economy relates to weapons, and it's a positive one. I really like the variety of weapons available in the game and how they relate to the jobs. Cecil's dark swords, Kane's spears, Yang's gauntlets, Edward's harp, and Sid's hammers are all unique character and job-specific weapons. Then there's how these weapons look in gameplay. I don't know if I just never noticed this before FF4 or what, but I love how each weapon has their own unique effects when you use them in battle. It's one of those small details that really adds by being there, even if it's never consciously noted by the player. That's about it on the item economy. I plan on having these long discussions about the item economy and dungeons around this part of the video, but as I've been writing this video, I found I kinda already talked about a lot of the components for these things. So these discussion sections going forward are just for cleaning up some loose ends. As we near the end of the Tower of Babel, we come across the King and Queen of Eblan, Edge's parents. In a scripted battle that is one of the game's best, the pair tries to attack the party, but either miss or do barely any damage. Edge calls out to the monsters, trying to find his parents somewhere in there, and it works, signified by a golden hue coming across them. We realize his parents are still in there. They give Edge the final words they were robbed of by Ligay, that he must serve his people and carry on the legacy of Eblan. They then end themselves, sparing Edge the pain of having to kill his family. It's a terrific sequence that, unfortunately, isn't respected by the direction the game takes with Edge's character. We will soon see Edge intentionally shirk royal duties to continue his adventure with the party, cultivating in his final scene, set perhaps years after the game, where it is revealed he is still not acting in a manner befitting his late parents' wish. It's a shame to see Final Fantasy IV drop the ball with this character, when I'd say I really like the other four members of the final party. With his parents gone, Rubicante reappears, challenging everybody to a fair duel. Gotta be honest, I like Rubicante, he's pretty based. He heals us before every fight we have with him, and all he wants is just a fight for the love of the game. Hell yeah, brother, respect. But Edge is too angry to appreciate the Chad Rubicante. With the power of anger, a rarity in JRPGs by the way, usually it's friendship, he gets a power up and we begin our battle against the last remaining Archfiend. Instead of covering Rubicante's boss mechanic as it's pretty much the same as all the other Archfiends, he's weak when he lifts his coat and otherwise is resistant, I'll take this time to talk really quick about something many of you have probably noticed in the footage I've been showing. I want to quickly cover the Final Fantasy XIV connections with this game, and how, to many, Final Fantasy IV is seen and represented in the modern day through that game. After thinking about it, and with some sage advice from a friend of mine, I've decided to keep including these Final Fantasy XIV sections in these videos like I did with Final Fantasy III. I think it's important to cover how these older Final Fantasies are represented in the modern day. However, unlike Final Fantasy III, no game will be referenced that heavily again, so the comparisons will be pretty superfluous and spoiler free. From the early days of 14, Final Fantasy IV was getting references here and there, such as in Stormblood in the Burn, where we get a recreation of the Mist Dragon. There was also Heavensward in the Anti-Tower, where they recreated Calcabrina. Now, obviously if you've played Final Fantasy XIV, you know where the meat of the references lie, in Endwalker. I'll keep these relatively surface level as I really don't want to say anything considered a spoiler, but the stars of the show in terms of remakes are the four Archfiend, who each get their own, to differing levels of intensity, boss fights. I'll refrain from mentioning the others explicitly, but just know pretty much all the major bosses from Final Fantasy IV got a remake in Endwalker. That, by the way, is something definitely exclusive to Final Fantasy IV. No other OG Final Fantasy game had a whole expansion pretty much dedicate itself to recreating bosses, music, and locations from an original game. I'm ignoring Dawn Trail and FF9 for now because it's not done yet, but that's probably a close second. In saying all this, the comparisons pretty much begin and end there. Unlike how Shadowbringers was a recreation of FF3's story in the modern day, Endwalker isn't really a retelling of Final Fantasy IV. The connections are there, but not super tight. Back to Final Fantasy IV now. Taking down Rubicante, Edge has avenged his mother and father. After telling him of the greater scheme at play, of Golbez and his plan to reach the moon to attain legendary power, he wants to fight with us, which we certainly have no objections to. We then enter the Crystal Room. We have a chance to action King Giot's plan to steal the crystal out from under Golbez's hands. But come on, do things ever go right for us? Cecil yells that we've stepped in a trap, trap. It's lucky he did, as nothing changes on screen to indicate that it's a trap. We fall all the way back down to the bottom of the tower. Now, imagine my face right now, looking at another fucking climb of this tower for the third time. As you can imagine, the crash out was pretty funny in the notes, but luckily for past me, the climb back up is short as we reach an enemy airship docked in the tower bay. We steal this, unlocking the second last airship, the Falcon. Something to note about this thing is it is actually a Red Wing ship. It's just a cool connection and callback, I think. The game started with Cecil commanding this airship to enact evil under Baron, and now he commands it for the good of the world. That's right, by the way. Remember, Cecil had a character arc in the first half. You would be forgiven for forgetting, given this whole half of the game has seen just about no development in his character. It's such a shame, seriously. Thank God the ending brings this train back on course. Taking the Falcon back to the Dwarven Castle, Geode tells us that Golbez is close to accessing the Sealed Cavern, the location of the last crystal. We are to make our way there and try to reach it before he does. If this sounds familiar to you, it's because it is. We've had this same scenario multiple times. We try and secure the crystal only for Golbez to steal it out from under us. It happened in Fabul and the Dwarven Castle. It's moments like these, on top of just generally slower progression in story and character arcs, that contribute to the poor pacing in this half of the game. Definitely not helped by dungeons like the Sealed Cavern. But before we can talk about bad dungeons, we need to talk about bad safe areas. This hasn't been an issue before now. Previously, the only gripe I had with safe zones was the lack of visual design differences and explorability in Final Fantasy 1. Now, in Final Fantasy 4, not only do both of these complaints also apply here, there are so many castles and towns that look the absolute same, but we can add a new one onto the list: loading screens. Going through the castles in specific, you need to go through so many loading screens to explore everything. When you first arrive in a location, you're usually fine to grin and bear it. You want to see everything enough to push through the load screens. Then, you revisit a second time after something you did in the story changes the state of the world, and suddenly, you're a lot less inclined to see the NPC's reactions because you need to go through 10 load screens to make it to this rinky-dink corner of the castle. This was never an issue before now. I have to wonder if the switch to the SNES meant more detail on each screen at the cost of splitting locations into more separated instances, but that's just a theory, and regardless, the outcome is the same. Before we head over to the sealed cave, we head to the infirmary to get the first sucker punch. Sid is alive. Apparently, he survived through, I don't know, the power of being old and quirky? Slay, I guess, King, good for you. He upgrades the Falcon with the ability to fly directly over the lava of the underground, giving us access to a ton of locations similar to when we unlocked the Enterprise for the first time. And I think that comparison is super intentional. This is your final party for the rest of the game, so exploring optional areas with them now really fits well into the general pacing and direction of the story. But I didn't do this. I tried going into one of the optional caves and got diddled, so I decided to do this stuff after I unlocked the final dungeon. I think this decision actually hurt my playthrough a fair bit. It made a moment towards the end of the sealed cave pretty annoying. Speaking of, let's talk about the worst dungeon in Final Fantasy IV. First, I'm going to cover why this dungeon sucks so much. Then, I'll talk about the game's dungeons looking at them holistically, not just from the perspective of why I don't like them, because no matter how much shit I throw at them, I still don't think they're anything lower than a 5 out of 10. So, the sealed cavern. Let's start with the low-hanging fruit. This is the exact same visual design as the magnetic cavern. There must have been some kind of hardware limitation with the original Final Fantasy IV that made it so they could only have so many dungeon graphics. But regardless of the reason, it doesn't let them off the hook. They did this much better in Final Fantasy I, a whole generation ago, but that isn't why this dungeon is the worst. The real reason lies with these things: trapdoors. The gimmick of this dungeon is that every door you interact with turns into this mimic-like enemy you need to kill to proceed. The first 2 times you do this, it's not too bad. The first results in a cool treasure room with good equipment, and the second advances you through the dungeon, straight to 2 more doors. Okay, these don't lead to anything as important, but whatever. And then the next room, 6 doors, 6 of the exact same enemy that, by the way, isn't a super quick kill. Like, why? It's a baffling decision. It's just so unfun to play. Final Fantasy as a series is surprisingly prone to moments like this. To romanticize bad game design, I'd say it's because for a series to have moments of brilliance by doing something new, it must be willing to take the hits with some of those new things being bad. In this respect, I think out of all the foundational era Final Fantasy games, Final Fantasy IV is most alike to Final Fantasy II. To quote a not at all wise man, it's a recreation of Final Fantasy II in a post-NES world. Anyways, as we tear our hair out here, you must be asking yourself, damn Adiris, are dungeons really that bad? And no, I honestly don't think so. If playing Final Fantasy II gives you anything, it's perspective. Perspective on what actually horrible dungeon design looks like. It's enough for me to say that while dungeons are worse than Final Fantasy 1 and 3, they're still fine. Not great, not even good, but fine. In the spirit of covering everything, let's start with the bad. I've already talked ad nauseum on visual design, but the problem of copied design also extends to layouts. While each type of dungeon, a cave, a hollow cave, an underworld cave, a waterway cave, and a techno tower, each have a different type of layout, the tight hallways of the towers, the large pillars of the underground cave, they share this general layout across all the dungeons of its type. The underground waterway and the old waterway are pretty much the same. You couldn't tell one from the other. It's actually a really similar situation to a game I mentioned in my very first video, Metaphor ReFantazio. I won't talk on that game since I already have, but if you've played it, just know that dungeons are very similar to Final Fantasy IV. While most types of layouts are fine, I would be remiss not to mention how painful these underworld caves are. Those poison tiles are horrid. Final Fantasy I had these, however in that game it was done so much better. Poison tiles only did super minimal damage. Here however, they do so much. It makes exploring them feel so painful. I really didn't like those. Anyways, next bad point, pacing. Not much to say here other than I kind of think they spent too long in a select few dungeons, mainly Tower of Babel. Needing to do, kinda, 3 runs of that place was really rough. It definitely hurt my engagement in the wider story at the time. Okay, on to what I'm ambivalent on. OST. Nothing really to note here. It's not good, it's not bad, it works. By the way, I want to clarify when I talk about this stuff, I'm referring to every dungeon bar one, the final dungeon of the game. That's getting a separate discussion when we get there because I love that place. Speaking of liking things, let's change the tone a bit and talk about the good of dungeons. I think they got the random encounter rate right. I felt like I, most of the time, had a good amount of time between battles that let me feel like I'm making progress exploring. Another thing I really like are the additions of the save and rest points. Before a boss or at the halfway point of some of the longer dungeons, they've added these special rooms where you can, for one, save the game, a kind of redundant feature in the Pixel remaster, but also use a cottage to fully restore your HP and MP. This was a super critical element in relieving stress from the MP crunch in the early to mid game, and one of the reasons the MP item economy in the later portion of the game feels weak. You can pretty comfortably make it to one of these rooms before you're forced to use an elixir or ether. But items aside, another reason these rooms are such a welcome introduction is because of the difficulty. Final Fantasy IV is definitely tied, if not a tad easier in my opinion, to Final Fantasy III, a pretty hard game especially towards the end. FF4 has awesome difficulty balancing, made even better by how it feels tailor-made for dungeons with these rest points in them. Also, last thing, but I found this too funny not to mention, remember in Final Fantasy II those dreaded, godforsaken empty rooms they had in dungeons? In case you're not aware, in every dungeon in that game you had these doors that led to a tiny empty room. When you entered, you were put right in the middle of the room and had to walk out. The catch was that the rooms had a crazy high random encounter rate. The only purpose of these was to waste the player's time. Easily, still, one of the most unexplainably stupid things I've ever seen in a video game. Well, in the Tower of Zot, they made a funny reference to these rooms by having them appear on one of the floors. Is this actually an intentional wink wink nudge nudge to 2? Probably not, but I can't help but seeing them that way and liking it all the same. Approaching the end of the sealed cave now, we take the crystal and are confronted by an amazing boss, the Demon War. This is yet another amazing boss. In terms of direct attacks, this guy doesn't do much. A weak physical single hit attack and a partial petrify. The real fun is that as the fight goes on, the boss slowly approaches the party. If he gets too close, he'll squish us against the wall behind us. This creates a really cool DPS check of sorts. We need to desperately try to kill it fast enough, trying to beat it in its race towards us. I was about to write it was a way better ending to the dungeon than it deserved, but I forgot the actual ending to the dungeon. As we walk all the way back to the entrance, we hear the voice and feel the presence of Golbez. He is successfully able to seduce Kain back under his control, having him steal the crystal and deliver it to the Tower of Babel, sending Golbez to the moon where his ultimate prize awaits. This moment, the most obvious twist imaginable aside, is one I really don't like. We had our final party. It felt like we had stopped the musical chairs of party members and the game would give us a nice amount of time to grow attached and sit with our ending members. But Kain leaving the party here throws a massive wrench in that. I won't go into why now, as I'll save it for when we get his replacement, but essentially, they are repeating the same mistake they made in Final Fantasy II. Besides this, Kain leaving the party throws a spanner in my plans. I wanted to, after this dungeon, do some of the side dungeons I'd skipped, but I can't now, since I know not all of my final party will be getting that experience. Maybe the game does have a back-end way of giving Kain experience while he is gone, but I wouldn't know, since the game's UI doesn't tell me. Anyways, we go back to the castle. Again, we really love this place in its loading screens, huh? The king tells us of an ancient legend, that of the lunar whale. We know there's some weight to this idea, as he recites the Mysidian prophecy we heard back when when this game was good. Sorry, I'm being mean. It's not that bad. Sid soon arrives and offers to attach a drill to the front of the Falcon, allowing us to travel back to the overworld at will. But before we can do that, we need to sit through this like 1 minute long cutscene of the characters moving around on a ship placed in a black void. I'm not sure what the point of this is. If it's meant to be an animation showcase, it failed because it's less technically impressive than some of the game's dances. It's also just so sudden in the main story, holding the momentum to watch this goofy cutscene. Take this as more evidence of the serious pacing problem in the second half of the game, by the way. Back on the overworld now, we hear the ancient prophecy again, now able to fully understand its meaning before praying. This begins one of the game's best sequences, the unearthing of the lunar whale and the ascent to the moon. That's right, after calling the lunar whale out of the ocean, one of Final Fantasy's coolest airships, by the way. I mean, look at this thing, we bought it. In a cutscene I would consider to be yet another iconic moment in this game's pantheon of them, we travel from Earth to, for the first time in Final Fantasy, the moon. I love the moon. It's small, there isn't much to do, and its design is kind of bad, but my lord does the aesthetic, OST and introduction to it absolutely sell me on how cool of a location this is. There are a few places to explore here, an optional dungeon I'll leave for later, as well as a settlement for the residents of the moon, the Loperites. I haven't mentioned him, but throughout the game we've been running across this weird rabbit called Naming Way, who's offered to change Cecil's name. The player has likely thought of it as this weird third wall breaking thing, which honestly it still kinda is, but the inclusion of this colony is really cool because it was kinda set up by this character being across the game. Also, by the way, I did not remember Loperites from this game. It was a total flashback the first time I read Naming Way, like holy. But other than those two places, there is one more, the final dungeon. To get there, we need to snake through multiple caves and blocked off pathways. I really liked this the first time, then liked it less and less as I had to walk this route more and more. While I do this, I also want to take a moment to quickly mention something I haven't yet, and that's character design. I really love the designs of every Final Fantasy IV party member, especially the main five. I think it really helps that each is associated with a colour, both in their text boxes and in their outfits. Cecil's starting colour of black and purple before switching to gold and light blue is a perfect visual representation of his character arc. Then there's Kain in his sky blue armour, as well as Rydia in her rich greens. Rosa and Edge are where the colour narrative kinda ends, as they don't really have one, but that doesn't stop their predecessors being colour coded. And then there is their designs. I'm not super well versed in this, so excuse my poor writing, but dude, it's just really good because they all look cool and unique. As we end our journey to the Crystal Palace, I want to mention how mean this part of the game feels. For me at least, the moon was really tough. I got my ass handed to me very soon into this expedition, but that's not why it's mean. It's mean because I can't go and grind till it's easier because Kain isn't in my party. I'm scared to grind because I fear any experience I get without him could be wasted. All I can hope is we get him back soon. In the Crystal Palace, we do not get Kain back anytime soon. Instead, we meet this new character, Fusoya. Before I go off on how much I hate this guy, it's a little fault of his own by the way, the game just did him really dirty. He's about to give us the biggest and worst exposition dump in the game, so let's lock in. We start by learning of a new race, the Lunarians. Long ago, they lived on a small planet between Mars and Jupiter. Facing destruction, they built a ship to travel to Earth. However, on their journey, they were also in the midst of evolving. Tough luck for that to happen then, and so built the entire moon we are on right now to facilitate this evolution. Up to now, the story makes sense, but then Fusoya pivots to talking about one Lunarian who didn't want to sleep, to raise Earth so that the Lunarians could settle there unabated by humanity. I thought the Lunarians settled on the moon to evolve, not because there were people on Earth. The exposition relating to the Lunarians is really clunky. It wasn't explained well at all. Hell, why is it even being explained like this? How is this the same game that opened with that extraordinary Red Wing sequence where it showed, not told us, so much about the world, the characters and relationships? Fusoya isn't done. He will now tell us a little more on this one Lunarian who didn't sleep. Despite a silly spell cast on him, this Lunarian is able to influence the people of Earth, using them to gather the crystals. The party puts together that he is the one behind Golbez's actions and asks his name, Zemus. With the crystals, the energy source of the Lunarians, he will activate the dimensional elevator, sending the Giant of Babel to destroy all life on Earth. With this information, the path we will take through the rest of the story is clear. We are to immediately return to Earth to stop this Giant of Babel, then afterwards take out Zemus once and for all. We next hear of Clea, Fusoya's brother, who explored and fell in love with Earth and someone on it. As a result, he had 2 children. One of them is Cecil. Because of the lack of setup or foreshadowing around the Lunarians, the reveal that Cecil is half Lunarian, for me, just lacks any actual weight. The issue of who the voice was on Mount Ordeals was totally dropped from the story after Mysidia. It's not been something pressing the characters or players' mind like what Golbez was after on the moon. Not everything is bad though. The reveal that Cecil has a brother who is also half Lunarian is an important detail that we should keep in mind for a character discussion coming up very soon. As we make our way all the way back through the lunar caves after Fusoya joins the party, let's cover why he is a horrible introduction to the story. This has little to nothing to do with him character-wise. I like the little battle animations they gave him, and his role as an otherworldly helper is fine. This has everything to do with how he's introduced. I mentioned a little bit ago that losing Kane was devastating for the pacing, because the players by now know that he is 100% going to be in your final party. So having to do this section with this temporary replacement, Fusoya, feels so wrong. Every battle I do feels like I am just wasting potential XP I should be giving to Kane. I want to spend as little time with him as possible so we can get back to the real final party. Very early into the video, I said this game's rotating party system worked because unlike 2, which was 3 mainstays and 1 temp, it was 1 mainstay and 4 temps. When everyone is replaceable, I treat no one as replaceable. But in this sequence, we are back in Final Fantasy 2. We have 4 mainstays and 1 temp. This fact is damning enough, even without considering things that make this even worse, like how Fusoya spends barely any time with the party, so the player doesn't get attached to him, or that his playstyle isn't at all unique. He's just Teller again, but better. Before we head back to Earth, I have some good news. This moment is what I would consider to be the end of the second half of Final Fantasy IV. From here on out, I'm going to have another attitude shift back to being as positive as I was in the first half. Before we do that though, as we did after Cecil became a paladin, let me give you a quick conclusion summarizing why this part of the game isn't great. Essentially, it all comes down to one thing: pacing. The moments that make the first part feel great, the character identities and arcs, the story's themes and ideas, the new and fresh combat system, all of it just feels much thinner in the second half. The moments are there, those moments of brilliance, but they are fewer and further between, lost in the sea of sparse character development, a dropping of key thematic ideas, and boring, repetitive dungeons. Now though, it's time for some peak. I hope you're as excited as I am. Back on Earth, in front of the Tower of Babel, the giant arrives. It begins its path of destruction, firing a devastating laser and flattening anything underneath it. The scale of this, the unique sprites and the stakes, all of it creates a cutscene the likes of which we haven't seen yet in the Foundational era. Faced with this insurmountable monster, the party asks themselves if there is anything they can do. And alone, maybe there is nothing, but they aren't fighting this battle alone. In a moment that can only be called a Final Fantasy special, we see tanks approach the giant. Commanded by Giot, the dwarves have made it to the surface, ready to fight for the fate of their world. But they aren't all. In another tank is Yang. That's right, he's still alive. I miss this moment, given Kane got stolen from the party, but he was recovered to health by the sylphs in the underground. Getting his survival revealed in this manner doesn't exactly ruin it. It's hard to ruin something that just inherently sucks, but it's still probably better to realize he is alive through going into that cave. Regardless, he's back and is helping. As the tanks fire on an approaching giant, we see it isn't enough, but that's not everybody. From the east, a division of airships arrive. On one of them, Sid, commanding the remains of the Red Wings and his engineer corps of Baron. Finally, his creation isn't being used by a tyrannical empire to expand, but to save and protect the world. But Sid's character would never get that level of seriousness. It's just a nice thought for the players like us. But Sid's forces aren't all. Another group contains the people of Mysidia, commanded by the Elder and joined by Palamon Porum. Of all the fake out deaths, the twins is the least egregious. It's super believable that the Elder was able to cure their incurable petrification. It's a really sweet moment, seeing all the people of Mysidia, after the tragedy they underwent, still fighting for humanity. Fighting for, in many ways, Cecil's cause. It's a great moment that demonstrates the theme of forgiveness, something that will only get more and more important in these ending hours. On the final airship are the women of Troya, with Edward right alongside them. All of our friends have found a way to help the world of Final Fantasy IV in its hour of need, and with all their efforts combined, they are able to make a difference. Alone, no one person could have halted the giant, but together they are greater than the sum of their parts. It's a message core to the question of what it means to be a Final Fantasy game. With all their friends buying them time, Cecil, Rosa, Rydia, Edge, and the Temp make their way inside, teleporting up the giant to meet some familiar faces. As is, by this point, our Final Fantasy tradition, we meet all 4 elemental fiends again near the the end of the game. They are back, but this isn't going to be like the rematches of prior games, a much easier time than their originals, done to help demonstrate to the player our party's growth through the story. Instead, it's going to be much harder, not because the bosses are different, but because we need to slay all 4 back to back to back to back. It's a fight reminiscent of the Doga and Une battle in Final Fantasy III, and it's brutal. These guys aren't playing around. It's super tough, but also super fair. Defeating it feels like an accomplishment and relief in the best possible way. Saying farewell to the best iteration yet of the 4 elemental enemies trope, we reach the core of the giant, this massive CPU and its accompanying nodes. The following boss fight is a really awesome puzzle, similar to the Bygone fight. There's the main CPU, who will maintain reflect on itself unless both the attack and defense nodes are down. In this scenario, it will do a sick attack that does the damage cap twice before restoring the other 2 nodes. The defense node will spam a really strong heal on the CPU, and the attack node does a light hitting AoE attack. So, to win, you need to take a similar approach to Bygone. Instead, this time you don't have a choice which accessory you take down. You must disable the defense node and keep the attack node up, letting that attack you instead of the main CPU. All the while, you need to keep the pressure on the CPU, dealing damage to that until you win. I hate to sound like a broken record, but the bosses are so good. They're so much better than ever before. With the CPU destroyed, the giant is disabled. The whole plan Zemus was working towards has come crumbling down. With a spell from Fusoya, the mist that clouded Golbez's mind is cleared. He is himself again. With his identity and memory restored, he drops a bombshell. His father's name was Kluya. He is Cecil's brother. The reason Zemus chose Golbez was his half-Lunarian side. It made it easier to control him, but that wasn't all. The darkness that was already inside of Golbez made it easier to manipulate his actions. This revelation puts Cecil in an understandably high amount of mental distress. Not only because all of his hatred has been towards his brother this whole time, but because just how easily the roles could have been reversed. Cecil is also half-Lunarian, but it isn't just that. Cecil was a Dark Knight. He wielded that same evil that Zemus found in Golbez. Before we take a second to review this scene and how it's a great development of some of the game's greater themes, let's finish it out. Golbez and Fusoya leave together, going to confront Zemus directly. The party urges Cecil to do something, say something to his brother. They urge him to forgive, but Cecil can't at the moment. He can't find it within himself to forgive his shadow, but there's no time for introspection. The giant is coming down and we need to escape. In this moment of need, we hear a voice. Guess who's back, baby? Kane is. He guides the party to an exit, allowing us to escape the giant unharmed while the forces of Earth finish it off for good. Now, let's take this moment to talk further on the villains of Final Fantasy IV, mainly Golbez and Zemus. If you saw my Final Fantasy III video and heard me describe Zemus' introduction to the story, you may have remembered something. I talked in that video about how, unfortunately, the Cloud of Darkness started a horrible trend in Final Fantasy games, where the main villain you have been facing the whole game is not, in fact, the final boss. I talked about how much I absolutely despise this, how it really ruins a lot of the potential story impact for a final boss fight. When Zemus was first introduced into the story, this is how I saw him. I was really sad that the game had switched out this amazing antagonist who perfectly represented who Cecil was fighting to not become like for this Lunarian 11th hour introduction. However, after the scene in the Giant of Babel, and from better understanding where the game was taking Cecil's real conflict with Golbez, I changed my tune. While I still don't like Zemus as a character, that dissatisfaction never changed. I don't think they ruined the conflict between Golbez and Cecil like I initially thought. Zemus' role in this dynamic is not to replace it, it's to change it. Before, it was a literal battle to determine if Cecil's path of change and atonement is better than Golbez's path of unrelenting pursuit of power through darkness. But now, it becomes a mental battle, one that Cecil has been fighting since the very beginning of the game. A battle to forgive. Cecil now needs to find the same strength he once afforded himself to give to his brother. To forgive Golbez is to forgive himself. But what about Golbez? Can he forgive himself? It is here we see the third approach the game takes to the idea of forgiveness and atonement. To recap this idea, by the way, the first approach is with Cecil. Cecil finds forgiveness through change. He is able to atone for the horrible things he has done by becoming someone different to the man made by Baron. Kain tries to find forgiveness through isolation isolation. Skipping forward a little to the end of the game, to atone for what Cain has done, falling under the spell of Zemus and acting as a pawn for Golbez, he separates himself from the party, his friends, and his family, undertaking the trial at Mount Ordeals like Cecil once did. More on this later. And finally, there is Golbez. For what he has done, he can never atone, never grow past it, never forgive himself. It is who he is now. So instead, he separates himself from the world, giving back in the only way he can, by leaving their lives for good. Now that we see the full pictures of Cecil, Cain, and Golbez, I think it's clear what Final Fantasy IV is trying to tell us, what the game's message is. In your life, you will do bad things you aren't proud of. No matter what the excuse or reason is, nothing will change the outcome of what you did. But through the story of Cecil, we see the writer's proposed solution to this. It is this: the only way to get true forgiveness is to change, to become more than the person who did that wrong. That is the core of Final Fantasy IV, the heart and soul of this story. We're approaching the end of the game now, so let's wrap this bad boy up. Returning to the Lunar Whale, Cain apologizes. No matter what mitigating factors Rosa brings up, the outcomes are undeniable. In the world of Final Fantasy IV, being under someone else's control is not an excuse. That viewpoint is represented by Edge, who is only assuaged by Cain's promise that he will be willing to give up his life if he is turned away from the light again. In what could have easily been an amazing moment, we see the party resolve to fight Zemus together, culminating in Cecil saying, "We go to the moon." But then, out of nowhere, Cecil kicks Rosa and Rydia off the ship, like not kindly asking them to leave either. Excuse me, what? Cecil, are you alright, mate? Like, is your head screwed on? Not only would you all be dead multiple times over if not for Rydia's summoning and Rosa's white magic, but like, this party is literally dysfunctional without them. I mean, who the fuck is gonna heal without Rosa? Cecil? Huh? You? Your highest spell is Cura. You suck. And the game takes this whole thing pretty far. We see the group fly off to the moon without the girls, making us think they were left behind, until it is revealed they were hiding off to the side this whole time and just join us again without objection. I've been avoiding this topic throughout the video when I could have brought it up. I'm not interested in talking about this kind of issues honestly, but I have to bring it up now as this is a distractingly bad example of it. Final Fantasy IV is misogynistic by today's standards. I'll only speak in the context of the time around the release for the Pixel remaster, as I was born more than 10 years after the original game came out. I have no clue what was acceptable or what it was like back then, but for today's standards, it's distracting. It's things like Rosa having no personality outside of being Cecil's personal support and the object of desire for him and Cain, or the way Edge's lust towards someone we've known as a child for a large part of the game is treated by the story as more comedic than a problem. There are the female warriors of Troya being dressed like dancers, and now, this moment, where the essential contributions these women give the party are brushed aside to protect them. I don't like it. It's a problem, and it would not be acceptable in a modern game. Enough said on that, I think. Let's move on. Regaining control on the moon marks a major moment. We can now access the final dungeon whenever we wish. It is here we are naturally guided to this game's suite of optional bosses and dungeons. So, let's make a start on those, and as I do, have a talk about how optional content is integrated into the game. In my Final Fantasy III video, we talked about how optional content can either be actually optional or not. There was also the mention of the Final Fantasy syndrome, when optional content isn't properly accounted for in the main story content. And finally, there was this graph where I showed in what games optional content is actually optional or not. Final Fantasy IV sat in the camp of games where optional content isn't optional, and my lord did I make the right call. Before we get into that, let's establish a baseline. What do I mean when I say optional content isn't optional? It all comes back to game balancing. To beat the final boss of Final Fantasy IV, you need your party at or above level 60. If, through the course of just playing the main story at a reasonable pace, ignoring optional dungeons and bosses, you can reach level 60, then optional content is optional. If, however, you end the main story at level 45 like I did, then optional content is not optional. It's only optional in the sense the player has a choice between doing it or just mindless grinding, and I think between the two, it's clear what 99% of players will choose on their first playthrough. Now, I want to make something clear off rip. I don't think it's a major problem to force the player to do optional content. I would prefer the ability to just follow the main story to beat the final boss, partially because because of how I play games, it doesn't affect me. I'll do it all anyways. I do think, however, it is a very, very big problem when even after doing that optional content, you are still criminally underleveled. I'm veering into the final boss discussion here, so let's steer this shit back towards the actual content. How is it? It's good. It takes a very similar approach to Final Fantasy III, where the dungeons and bosses that are optional relate to collecting summons like Leviathan, Ashura, Odin, and Bahamut. They also sprinkle a little Final Fantasy I in there. In the Cave of Summons, you can find the Rat's Tail, remember that? Which can be traded for the adamantine needed to upgrade the Sword of Legend. What we got right after Cecil became a paladin into Excalibur. I always love it when games do this. Take a weapon that the story hypes up as legendary, but falls to the wayside by power scaling, just for it to get an awesome upgrade near the end that makes it viable as the final weapon. So how do we get the summons? Well, we need to travel through the Sylph Cave and Cave of Summons, two extremely painful dungeons that I've talked about already, so I'll let that sleeping dog lie. Instead, I'll focus on this cool detail you can find in the Town of Summons. In this library, you can get hints for some of the other summons you can fight. You can read about how lightning works really well against Odin's Zantetsuken, and that the only way to endure Bahamut's mega flares is to reflect them back at him. I usually love this kind of foreshadowing. It feels fun and satisfying to read and then go and actually see it work. Unfortunately, just because a bad boss is foreshadowed doesn't make it any better. Bahamut, in specific, I think isn't up to the standards set by the rest of Final Fantasy IV. Before we reach him in his cave on the moon though, we need to face a gauntlet of the legendary behemoths. These are by far the scariest iteration of the monster yet. These things are so damn strong, it's crazy. If you hit them, they immediately counter with a devastatingly strong attack of their own. To beat them, we must only hit it with attacks from our strongest party members as to minimize the behemoth's counters. A really cool and mechanically deep enemy for a random encounter, but that's the status quo for the moon, which I can't wait to elaborate on soon. But before that, we need to deal with Bahamut. So, like it was foreshadowed, to beat Bahamut, all you need to do is maintain Reflect on your party while he only uses one move, Mega Flare. This means the fight is just sitting around waiting for him to cast the attack, reapplying Reflect on anybody who it falls off on. I have the perfect way to describe this boss and why I don't like it. Bahamut is a Final Fantasy III puzzle boss, pure and simple. And while I liked puzzle bosses playing Final Fantasy III, we are not in the foundational era anymore. The bar for boss fights has been raised so much by what Final Fantasy IV has already done. My expectations are much higher now than they were for FF3, and it's by these expectations that Bahamut is not a good boss. With the ability to summon Bahamut, that's all the obvious optional content done. Now, we only have one thing left, one more challenge to overcome. In the Crystal Palace, we receive the power of the 8 crystals and are teleported below the surface of the moon. Welcome to the Lunar Subterrane, Final Fantasy IV's best dungeon. Right off the bat, the first two things the player notices are a relief. It has a semi-unique visual design, something that will only get better as we go lower, and a great OST, being scored with the Red Wings theme. The choice to use the Red Wings theme again is quite interesting. It was used to denote the journey back to Baron, the journey to the inciting incident that began our journey. Now, it is used again to denote our journey to the end of our adventure. It's a clever, full circle moment that just hit right. As we explore, we can see that the loot in this dungeon, as is the case with every final dungeon we've encountered so far, is stellar. So many cool items and equipment upgrades that are all exciting to pick up. Read how they benefit us and equip. And this cool loot isn't just contained to the chest of the dungeon. In this awesome stairway down to the core, we can see pillars with special weapons on it. If you remember from Final Fantasy III, we have seen these before in Eureka. It is the same here as it was there. These are legendary weapons that have a boss fight tied to their acquisition. All of these bosses are awesome, by the way. There are too many to list individually, but I especially love Dark Bahamut, who is fine unless you summon regular Bahamut, in which case Dark Bahamut will cast a devastating Mega Flare as a counter. Already, this is turning out to be a great final dungeon, but then you reach the next stage of the dungeon, the 8th floor. If you've played Final Fantasy XIV, this is where it should start looking familiar to you. This part of the dungeon forgoes the tight, winding hallways and dramatic structure of the first part in place for a straight shot downward, a relatively simple path to the core. However, blocking your way are the most creative and fun random encounter enemies in any Final Fantasy game we've done so far. The Wicked Mask, who instantly gives Reflect to himself and all of us, forcing us to play a magical ping pong with him. Behemoths, which we have already covered, are just as brutal. And then at the bottom, there's Zemus's Mind and Breath. It's such a cool idea to have a random encounter enemy so closely tied to the final boss not actually fight us. He is scanning us, getting information to report to Zemus. We can wail on him with little to no resistance. It's really clever setup for the final boss. It gets me more and more excited to face off against this guy. Another, and my last, special mention is something from the previous layer, this Lil Murderer. I would be confident, just as I was in Final Fantasy I in the War Mech, in placing this guy as the origin of the Tonberry, one of my favourite staple Final Fantasy enemies. Anyways, to recap this discussion, as I don't want any lingering doubts before we get to talking about the final boss, this final dungeon on a first run really dazzled me. It's an amazing showcase of Final Fantasy IV's best qualities and a terrific precursor to the end. Speaking of, it's time. Writing this video after playing the game, I was pretty confident about what I would say on each topic. There wasn't much conflict internally on if I like dungeons or not, for example. I can't say the same for the discussion surrounding the final boss. I am really conflicted. It feels like I can write two very different endings to this video. So, the solution I came up with? That's what I'll do. I'll start by listening to the side of me that is saying the final boss is an abject failure, a horror of extremely poor design decisions that makes it the worst boss in Final Fantasy so far. Afterwards, I'll write what the other side of me thinks, that this boss is an unbelievably great final boss with an intro sequence and battle that put me on the edge of my seat and had me cheering taking it down. With that clear, let's start. There are a couple relatively small individual issues that compound together to turn this boss into a disaster. The first is how the player starts the fight. It isn't by walking into an obvious boss room like previous games, it's just wandering a little too far forward on the path you are already on. This primes the player to be unprepared for the final boss, even if they know the level required. This issue then compounds with the cutscene leading up to the boss. The fact this cutscene isn't skippable is insane. It's a 5-minute and 45-second prelude to the actual boss fight, but you need to understand the final point as it really wraps everything into a nice bow. This fight is horribly balanced. There is no reason a final boss shouldn't be doable when you have done all the story and optional dungeons, getting as much loot as you can while never skipping random encounters. Locking the final boss behind mandatory grinding is a horrible decision that kills all momentum and pacing you have going into the fight. And the worst part is, it's such an easy fix to balance this fight. Just adjust the damage of Zeromus' signature move, Big Bang, down like 500 damage points from 2k to 1.5k. That's it. If you did that, the fight would still feel tough, but actually fair at the level you were at by the end of the game. That extra 500 damage on his move is what the player needs to grind to counter. Now, with all the factors laid out, let me paint you the picture. You stumble on the final boss underleveled. You die because it is poorly balanced. Then to redo the boss, you need to sit through the same nearly 6-minute cutscene you've already watched to try again. So, faced with the decision to try again or grind, what are you going to do? Wait 6 minutes just to probably die again? No! You're going to grind to be able to survive Big Bang more comfortably. For me, this period of time grinding took an hour and a half. During said time, all the magic of the boss, the amazing intro cutscene, the cool looking moves, the awesome OST had just lost its luster. It was no longer special. Okay, I know I've been quite harsh there, and I think deservedly so. I said how I honestly feel. I hope this doesn't make it too weird now to hear another element of how I truthfully feel about how I adore this fight. Okay, let's set the scene. Approaching the final room, we see Golbez and Fusoya fighting Zemus. I really like Zemus' design, how his body looks like it's just a part of his cloak. The only recognizable features being his face and arms outstretched. Although I do think the shark hoodie he's wearing does look a little goofy. After Golbez and Fusoya team up to cast Double Meteor, Zemus appears to have died, but we know it can't be that easy. From his body, a flame erupts. It claims to be the evil and hatred of Zemus made manifest, a being called Zeromus. This is a super JRPG-like moment, by the way. No other game is the final boss something like the hatred of the bad guy made manifest. But growing up on these games, I'm a sucker for it. I can't help but like it, as corny as it may be. With a single shockwave, Zeromus instantly takes out our party, leaving only Fusoya and Golbez standing. In battle though, they can't do anything. Normal attacks like Meteor don't work. In fact, they heal it. The only way to do damage to him is to expose his true form through the crystal, a symbol of light and good to counter the darkness and hatred of this being. But when Golbez tries it, it doesn't work. Zeromus here echoes a sentiment said earlier by the Elder of Mysidia as well as the King of Fabul. Darkness can never overcome true evil. Golbez is darkness. He has not undergone that same process of atonement and forgiveness that Cecil has. He cannot wield this symbol of light. Because of that, the two fall. The situation is truly hopeless now. We have all fallen and Zeromus is about to finish us once and for all. It is here. We cut back to the tower in Mysidia. We see everybody. Not only Cecil has become friends with, but the player too. You see, unlike in Final Fantasy III, when this moment felt flat because the game didn't do enough to make the player care for the side characters, Final Fantasy IV is the opposite. You have spent a good amount of time with these people, getting to know and like them. The Elder calls out to everybody. They must pray. Pray for their allies, their friends, and the world as a whole. We are its final hope. Yang, Edward, Palamon Porom, Cid, and Giot all unite. It's interesting. All the characters aren't looking off into the distance. They are looking at us, the player. On this note, we cut back to the party. Cecil remains standing. He rushes to Golbez's side, receiving the crystal he tried and failed to use. Facing off against Golbez now, Cecil proclaims, with the weight of his entire journey in the arc behind him, Zeromus, I won't lose. I can't. We enter the final boss battle proper now, placed in an incredible backdrop that feels like we are flying through the whole universe, fighting this extraterrestrial being. Cecil has 1 HP, the party is down, it looks hopeless again, but Cecil is not alone. A core message of every good Final Fantasy game is this: the friends you make on your journey through life's challenges are not just your physical strength, as represented through the party system, but your spiritual strength. One of Final Fantasy's most important legacies, created here. Scored by the same rendition of the main theme we heard leaving Baron, we know this is it, the culmination of the journey. We hear thirst from Palom and Porom, and with their hope, our party is revived from death. We next hear from Edward and Tala, telling us we can't give up, their prayers giving Rosa and Rydia the strength to fight. Next, Yang and Cid, their hopes lie with us, and their prayers give Kain and Edge the vitality to fight. And finally, in Cecil's moment of need, we hear from Golbez, his brother, encouraging Cecil to become the man he was born to be, a man Golbez never could. Those final words still ringing, Cecil uses the crystal on Zeromus. Because of his light, the goodness we have seen him attain on his journey, it works, and the monster underneath is revealed. The final boss battle from here on out is hectic, chaotic, epic, cinematic, pretty much every ick you can think of. In ancient history at this point, I talked about the ATB system and mentioned it changed throughout the game. This fight is the best example of that. By now, our party has gained enough agility to have the ATB bar fill up super fast. There is practically no time to think before we need to cast a move, and if we don't get one out, Zeromus will do a devastating attack that will inevitably be hard to recover from. This, honestly, makes the fight feel a lot like a live action fight instead of a turn-based one. It adds so much to the feeling of franticness, of actually fighting an insurmountable force. Then there's the OST. I adore Zeromus' theme, Pixel Remaster version included. It's an amazing theme that really adds to the grandiosity of the whole fight. Then there's Zeromus' design. I mean, look at that, it's horrific, it's intimidating, it's so fucking cool. Also, watching our party at its best is really, really satisfying. Like seeing Kain jumping for massive damage, Rose's massive Curaja heals, Cecil's devastating attacks with the Ragnarok, Rydia's Bahamut doing Mega Flare and getting to empty out a stock of weapons with Edge's throw. The job system really lets this fight feel like the culmination of everything we have learned and attained on this journey. This also extends to the boss's moves. Big Bang just looks incredible. I love how it's so powerful it shifts the air around it, warping the background to go in reverse before resuming its flight through us. What an awesome attack. But he isn't just limited to one move. I mean, of course he isn't. What final boss would do that? He has bio, flare, and a passive region that we need to make sure we deal more damage than. It's all just so cool. And just like that, before we know it, he is defeated, disintegrating before us in combat and in cutscene. Before returning home, Fusoya helps clarify to the party Zeromus' final words, an underlying message of not only Final Fantasy IV, but the foundational era games as well. As long as there is light, there is darkness. One exists only because the other does as well. But this doesn't mean we should condemn ourselves to not take a side. We must fight for light, for good, as if we don't, we are doing a disservice to the world and ourselves. Before we leave for Earth, Golbez asks Fusoya if he can come with him to stay in hibernation with the Lunarians. This is the solution we talked about earlier to Golbez's guilt. He will not seek forgiveness from the world he once tormented. He will instead spare them of his presence. But even if the world condemns him, he still wants the forgiveness of one man. Someone who, like him, was filled with darkness, however unlike him, was able to overcome and expunge it. He seeks Cecil's forgiveness, but Cecil doesn't give it at first, to which Golbez understands. As he walks away though, and with the whole party's support, we hear Cecil's final line before the ending cutscene. Goodbye, my brother. This is more than just acknowledging Golbez as his brother. This is Cecil acknowledging that Golbez is his shadow, a man he simultaneously once was and could have remained being. By forgiving Golbez, Cecil has truly and fully forgiven himself. His journey of atonement has reached its final conclusion. It is on that note that the final cutscene begins. We see the solar system and the ancient Mystidian prophecy. However, it doesn't end where it usually does. There's more. The next part details what will happen after the events of the game, that the moon will set forth on a new voyage, leaving Cecil and Golbez forever separated. As the lunar whale is returned to Mystidia, we see the aftermath of the game, what each character is up to. It wasn't until going through these small cutscenes that I realized how much I actually love this cast of characters. The strength of a Final Fantasy game is the strength of its party. I am a firm and passionate believer of that statement, and this is the first game we have done to really embody it, making Final Fantasy IV the progenitor of yet another critically important legacy. Most of what we see in this cutscene is what we should expect. Palom and Porom training, while Edward, Yang and Edge become king. But there are a few with a little more impact and meaning. First, seeing Rydia return to the town of Summons is a really sad moment. She has no family in Mist anymore, no reason to live above the ground. She will spend the rest of her days surrounded by the summons she commands, experiencing time at a much faster rate than everyone else. She will die within a few years for the rest of the party, but she'll do so surrounded by her new family. Then, in another cutscene that I would go as far to call iconic, we see Kain atop Mount Ordeals for the first time without his helmet. He is isolating himself from his brother, Cecil, and his love, Rosa, until he has surpassed his father as a dragoon. There is a lot to unpack from this short scene, but the most pressing thing is recognizing this as Kain's answer to the question of forgiveness. As mentioned, Kain seeks forgiveness through isolation, facing Mount Ordeals, the location that represents introspection, alone. Throughout the course of the game's story, its themes would have us think this is a decision doomed to fail. Cecil was only able to succeed on his journey because of the people he had met giving him the support he needed. But the game also gives us a clue that maybe all hope is not lost after all. One of the most profound representations of Cecil's transformation into a paladin was how his face was presented. He went from a man covered by the intimidating, scary mask of the Dark Knight to one free to show his face, long white hair and all. Kain being without his mask here, I think, is a reference to this transformation of Cecil's. Like him, Kain needs to take off the mask he wore while acting under Golbez while committing those evils to let free the man he is underneath. Will he succeed though? We don't know. It's left up to the player to determine. And it's something I, by no means, want to rob you your thoughts of. So what do you think? As we ponder that, the cutscene proceeds. We get a time skip, cutting forward to Cecil and Rosa's wedding. We see all our friends, minus Kain, one by one arrived at the ceremony, each having a custom animation that shows their unique personality. It really is such a credit to this game's ability to build up character that you can tell what each animation means, such as Edge turning away from Rydia sheepishly. When everyone arrives, they line up before turning around. They are looking at us now, and they wave. A third wall break that perfectly embodies the message we have seen at the end of all our adventures. A heartfelt thank you from the developers, an appreciative farewell before the credits roll. I love Final Fantasy. It's my favourite series of games for many reasons. Interesting worlds, fun exploration, creative combat systems, all of which are equally important in my eyes. But if I had to name one thing, one quality that, to me, is the most important in these games, it all comes down to just one word: characters. I play Final Fantasy games for the characters in them. I want to be invested in them, their struggles, their hopes, and their arcs of change. The Foundational era never really did this, limited by the times, but the Visionary era is different. This is a time period where each and every game, in one or more elements, saw way ahead of its time and helped fully realize key traits that the Foundational era had only laid out sparsely. Final Fantasy IV is years ahead of its time in its treatment of character, its themes surrounding their identity, how it relates to their jobs, and how they go on journeys to seek forgiveness are all done incredibly. It's a game with more iconic and memorable moments than all the games before it combined. Those moments being iconic because of their relation to the characters. When I look back on this series one day and ask myself that essential question, what does it mean to be a Final Fantasy game? I must remember Final Fantasy IV and the incredible legacy that it has created.